Order. All rise. We're going to do Pledge of Allegiance, and everyone who'd like to join us, welcome. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone, to the November 5th, 2018 Planning Commission meeting. We're going to change the agenda very slightly, and I started to talk about this just before the pledge. The Range Rover, Land Rover project is not on the agenda now for tonight. It's postponed. We may be able to do, we are able to do it. Okay, so John, are you prepared to go forward, or would you rather wait until after Wawa? Because I had a request from David Falcone to change the agenda position.
I think Dave wants us to wait.
Okay, that's fine. Just so that means, everyone, we're going to do Wawa first after we do a little bookkeeping. Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes of the October meeting? The very long October meeting. Can I have a motion to approve?
I move we approve the minutes as submitted.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Well, we go right to the main event, which is a discussion of the Wawa project. This is the first time that Wawa has actually been before planning. I imagine that some of you may have either attended or watched the community development meeting on September 27th. If you have not, you may want to look at that on YouTube after this meeting, because there's a lot of information that was conveyed. But we're going to start from scratch here. And is the applicant ready? We're waiting on Nick. I see Nick in the lobby, so. Nick, sorry to tell you, but you're now first on the agenda. And we're waiting for your, Penn has asked to be moved to last. And Jaguar is off the agenda for tonight. So I like the format that Luke Clark used, which is the applicant presents. We talk to staff about the latest updates. Then we have public comment, and then, of course, questions by commissioners as necessary, but then keep our comments mainly to the end.
Sure. And what we're intending to do is basically what you said, is go through the plan. We'll go through the staff comments that we already have that are written. We'll specifically stress some items that we know everyone's concerned about. Obviously, Matt Hammond from TPD is here. He'll talk about traffic. We'll talk about stormwater and things of that nature that we know everyone's concerned about.
Thank you for being flexible on this.
Okay, thanks. I expected it to not go on till 9 o'clock, so it could be an early, may get to see some of the football game. This is the site, as you can see here. This is the current condition site, and I believe that you're somewhat familiar with the site. Here's Lancaster Avenue. Here's Aberdeen. Thanks. Lancaster and Aberdeen. And currently on this site is gas and an automobile repair shop back here. Then also we have the gas for the BP station and an existing car wash. Currently, there's a number of curb cuts on this site, actually 6 total curb cuts on this site. We're reducing those number of curb cuts to 3 curb cuts. The existing impervious, obviously, currently is so old that there's no stormwater management on the site currently. we will be proposing stormwater management that actually captures, I believe, approximately, what do we say, 147% over what is required by the township, and we'll go over that in more detail later on this evening. Actually, we're reducing the building square footage on the site also by a little bit, the buildings themselves. The gas dispensers, I know there's always been talk about the number of gas dispensers. Currently on the site, there are 12 gas dispensers. They will be reduced to 6 gas dispensers. That equals, actually, currently on the site, there's 21 fuel points. We're reducing that to 12. And again, we'll show you the plan. I'm sure everyone's kind of familiar with it already. As to sewage, actually, there's a great reduction in sewage that we can talk about. Eric Britz from Bowler can discuss that also as to the amount of sewage is being carried off the site as a result, mainly because of the result that the car wash is being removed from the site. Also, we know a concern is lighting, and we'll address that later on this evening. And the canopies involved with the lighting, actually, as to the number of parking lot lights, currently there are 13 parking lot lights on this site. We're proposing 8, and again, we'll hear discussion about foot candles and things of that nature on the neighboring properties. If we can show the plan, please. And actually, this is Pete Karakelian, who's one of the owners with his dad, Gary, who's down at the back. He's one of they're the property owners for the site. They will continue owning the site. This site's not being sold to Wawa. This will be under a lease agreement with Wawa. Again, here's Lancaster Avenue. Here's Aberdeen Avenue. We mentioned the one driveway on Aberdeen here, 2 driveways on Lancaster in that location, and in that location, this particular one, the westernmost driveway on Lancaster, is being proposed as a right-in only and a right-out only. We feel, and Matt can get into this somewhat, that this would alleviate the strain on Aberdeen Avenue and Lancaster by having this right-in access here and then the right-out access as well at this particular vantage point. I believe the township has discussed about eliminating this point, but again, Matt will discuss that and the pros and cons of that occurring later. Currently, there is very little buffer being proposed, or currently on this site. We're proposing a full-blown buffer planning strip, in addition to having the buildings comply with the rear yard setback, which is current building over here, which is the automobile repair shop, as well as the car wash, do not comply with the rear yard setback. So we're proposing that they would now comply with the rear yard setback requirements. As I mentioned, we will discuss lighting here. The number of parking spaces, I believe 52, is that correct? 55 parking spaces of what is being proposed for the site, which meets, more than meets the requirement for retail use on the site. We do have some concepts. It's not really a matter for this board, I know, to determine, to look at architectural features, but we know it's a concern. So we're going to show you some concepts that Wawa has for the site itself. Do we have a plan for that, guys? Again, these are some concepts that Wawa, again, and we would like, the township's input on this, as well as the neighbor's input as to the design of the building. This one here obviously shows a brick-type design for the Wawa store, which would be similar to, actually, along that road, there's a lot of brick buildings as you head east on the brick. I'm sorry? Oh. Pete, let's get the others too.
I think we mean our monitors are not as clear as the big boards.
What will be able to do. And what was this design? This is made of?
This is just a stucco and stone
Okay.
standard.
Yeah, this is the standard stucco and stone design that you probably see on a lot of the Wawa sites. And then the other ones also.
The other one is placing stone. Yeah, no brick.
Basically the brick and the stucco. One thing should be noted that currently along that area, as you know, the canopies are kind of flat canopies. Wawa is proposing an A-frame type canopy, and I believe that was at the request of some of the meetings that we had with the neighbors and with the Board of Commissioners to make the A-frame type canopy. Currently, just mainly because it's more attractive. As I had mentioned during the discussion, actually be less canopy lights being proposed for the site than currently exist on the site, since there are two gas canopies on the site itself. I'd like to turn over maybe a little bit to Eric here. Maybe, Eric, you can discuss stormwater management.
Excuse me, Nick. Just before this meeting, I looked at the September 27th meeting on YouTube for a while. The canopy you just showed, does that change the heights from 25 feet and 15 feet?
Yeah, the actual average height of that canopy, according to what I have here, I believe, is 17 feet 4 inches. That's the average for the
20 feet, 8 inches.
20 feet 8 inches is what was stated. Okay, Eric, do you want to? Actually, one thing about landscaping I want to note too is we're proposing 52 additional trees for the site, basically along that buffer area in the back. There you go.
Thank you. Good evening. So once again, Nick, you stole my thunder.
Okay.
So just going through the impervious coverage that Nick had pointed out, we're decreasing the impervious coverage for the site by about 1,000 square feet in an effort to comply with the code from the landscaping perspective, putting in all the required trees that are being requested. For the building coverage, it's actually a grand total. When you look at the building coverage, you consider the building and the canopy together. So all said and done, it's an increase of approximately 200 square feet of building coverage, but again, a decrease of about 1,000 square feet total for impervious coverage. As Nick noted, we're decreasing the number of dispensers from 12 to 6, cutting them in half. The fuel points from 21 fuel points to 12 fuel points. So it's a reduction by 9 points to get fuel. From a stormwater management perspective, we're more than meeting the code requirement. The code requires 1,972 cubic feet of volume to be treated. We're proposing 2,781 cubic feet, which is it's 141% of that which is required by the code. And that's going by the strict letter of the ordinance, which requires that you don't count the stone storage within the basin. It is designed that there's a lot more storage actually in there than that 2,781 cubic feet in the stone, but it's not counted in the calc. So if you count that together, you're actually 163% of that which is required by the code for stormwater management. We've also received some comments from the township engineer on trying to do a little bit more from a stormwater perspective, we are going to do that, or at least look into it and see what we can feasibly do. It is a tough site. It's limited with high groundwater. It's a hot spot. If you listen to the last meeting that we had, due to the two gas stations that are there, so it will be a lined basin, but it'll be treated using a slow release concept type basin, which is one of the latest ideas that has come out of the DEP in the last few years. We're also going to put inlet inserts into all the inlets with oil booms to collect all the oil, so that doesn't go into the system. Any that does happen to spill. From a water and sewer perspective, it's a great decrease in water and sewer. Obviously, the car wash used a lot of water. It's an old car wash. It doesn't have the water recycling facilities, so it uses over 4,000 gallons per day. We're estimating that the Wawa would be about 1,600 gallons per day. There's an application into the DEP right now for a sewer waiver, which we're on the cusp of receiving. And then from a tree and landscape perspective, I'm going to introduce Travis North. He's our registered landscape architect at Bowler Engineering, who prepared the lighting and landscaping plans. Travis?
Greetings, my name is Travis North with Bowler Engineering. I'm a licensed landscape architect registered in Pennsylvania. With regards to the existing conditions, really want to talk, I want to start by saying that we're fully compliant with regards to the landscape requirements for this plan set. We do not request any relief for landscaping, but I do want to focus on this southern buffer. Existing today is a lot of, I'll call it insignificant plantings, a little more scrub plantings. There are a couple trees along here, but most of the stuff is young, small, not large enough to be picked up on a survey. We're proposing, we have mostly evergreen trees along the southern boundary, with a couple shade trees that are also being applied towards the parking lot requirement. There are 5 existing trees on site that we are going to be preserving as part of this application. A cluster over here, the southwest corner, and then 3 street trees. Existing today is a non-compliant street tree. We are proposing additional street trees to provide the minimum number of street trees for the site. With regards to lighting,
Excuse me 1 second.
Sure.
Somewhere in the materials today, we were talking about some of the trees that are significant are actually owned by the property owners, the residential property owners. So I hope that you take note to do protective measures to protect those trees during construction.
yes, there are trees that are off-site that we have picked up on a survey, and the improvements are not expected to be a concern to those existing trees from a health perspective. But they will be monitored during construction, and there's going to be protection measures in place.
I meant that you know where they are, but, you know, a shade tree would say that you have to put up the fencing to give that protection. You know, somebody with a backhoe may not know that that tree is staying, et cetera.
Yes, there will be tree protection measures in place prior to construction and carried on and monitored through construction to make sure that those trees are preserved appropriately. Do we have the existing? Okay. With respect to the lighting, I want to start by the existing conditions. I know this is probably not that easy to read, but I will walk you through the existing conditions. We have prepared a model of the existing conditions based on what's known about the existing lighting. Now, I want to keep this in mind. Some of these lights are at a state of disrepair, such as an existing light right here at the end of the car wash that is not functioning at full capacity. So this lighting exhibit demonstrates the anticipated light levels, assuming everything was in 100% working condition. Now, we've learned a lot in the lighting industry over the years, so the light levels that we have here existing on site are very high, unnecessarily so by today's standards. Light levels under both of the canopies reaches up into the 80, 90, and even 100-foot candle ranges. Now, that may sound like a lot because it is, but at the time that this was originally constructed, the belief was more light is better. We now know better. We are going to be doing a significant reduction on the under canopy lighting. The lighting all throughout the existing parking areas is also fairly inconsistent. The existing lights are not what we now call full cutoff fixtures. They have sag glass lenses on them. They throw light. Oh, right, forgot about this. As you can see, this is a view of the gas canopy today. Now, I don't want anyone to really focus on what the light levels look like because this was taken with a camera. What I want you to focus on is the glare that you see from each of these fixtures. This is because the light is not full cutoff. It's throwing light in all different directions. We are not going to be doing that on the proposed condition. All the lighting on the proposed condition is going to be controlled. It's going to be full cutoff, emitting no glare and no uplight into the sky. Yeah, we have a little bit of a, so this is a 3D rendering of what we anticipate the site will look like. We have the other ones as well. Now, this is a view from, this is probably the best one to give you an idea. And you can see, obviously the canopy is going to be the brightest spot, but we're looking at light levels between 20 and 30-foot candles, not the 100 that exists today. All of the lights on site, including the ones underneath the canopy, are full cutoff in and of themselves. The canopy, of course, helps to prevent any sky glow, but this is the intended light on the site. From a rendering, you can see that there's a bit of a soft glow, but definitely very adequate for safety, very adequate for usability of the site. And another view, just so you can get an idea. Okay. It's not me?
Yeah.
Okay. So to give you an idea, this is, if the landscaping that's proposed was non-existent, this would be the view from the neighboring site. Now, that's an important factor when we are doing our calculations for lighting. We're not calculating for the proposed landscaping. All of the light that's going to be controlled is going to be controlled by means other than the landscaping. So if I could go back to the proposed, this is quite a stack now. That one. Okay. Two more. There we go. No, that's existing. Proposed is right here. So this again is the southern property line. Existing today, there's a little bit of light trespass from originating from on the site onto the neighboring property. In the proposed condition, we are at 0.0 foot candles on the adjacent properties. Now, the key, again, I'd like to remind you that none of the landscaping that's proposed in here is a factor in that calculation. So when sorry, I keep blocking the thing. When the landscaping is installed, we can only expect that to be better. We have a little bit of trespass into the road. We are not modeling the existing street lighting that is both on our side and across the street from the site. We also have a little bit of trespass onto the adjacent property. This is the Verizon store. However, we are greatly reducing the light levels onto the adjacent property from the existing condition. This is the commercial property. As far as the canopy is concerned, if you recall, some of the light levels on the existing canopy are 80 and 90 foot candles. We are now at an average light level of 28.49 foot candles, which is consistent with recommended industry standards as recommended by the IES, which is for the Illuminating Society of North America.
What's the light candles range? Not
Sorry?
the average, the range? The range?
The
You said
average
the
range?
average is 28. What's the range?
The range is a minimum of 11-foot candles. This is just the light levels under the canopy. The range is a minimum of 11-foot candles and a maximum of 47-foot candles. Now, all throughout the site, we're looking at an average light level of 2.27-foot candles with a minimum of 0.7-foot candles and a maximum of 6.7-foot candles, excluding the canopy.
Eric, do you have any? Okay. Yeah, I guess just, we can go through the engineering comments, the civil engineering comments now, or we can present Matt to talk about traffic and then go through all the traffic comments at once, so whatever the board. Please, since we're talking about civil engineering, maybe we should do the civil comments first. Roger's comments?
I think for a lot of people, this might be their first public view.
Okay,
So
we'll go through the whole.
I think we have to go the whole 9
Okay.
yards.
All right, Matt? I'll move my stuff.
Good evening. My name is Matt Hammond. I'm with Traffic Planning and Design. I'm the traffic engineer that's been hired to address the traffic issues with the subject development. As was mentioned earlier and briefly, and I just want to reiterate the access to the site. The existing site, if you're familiar with the site, obviously has two separate users on the property in question. The farthest user, gas station on Lancaster Avenue, provides for two full access driveways to Lancaster Avenue. As you move closer to Aberdeen, the Sunoco on the corner provides for two full access curb cuts on Lancaster and then two curb cuts on Aberdeen. So a total of 6 curb cuts exist at the sites. The proposed site looks to reduce the number of curb cuts, which from a traffic engineering perspective is a benefit. Reduces the number of access points or conflict points on Lancaster Avenue. We're proposing a full access driveway on Lancaster Avenue, as far back from Aberdeen Avenue as possible. We also, going from east to west, are proposing a right-in, right-out driveway, which is in proximity of where the second full access driveway is, serving the corner property. And then we're also proposing a full access driveway on Aberdeen Avenue, again, as far south as we can provide it. There has been significant coordination and discussions that have occurred on this site to date. We've had a number of meetings and a number of reviews that have been completed. We've had one review by PennDOT with respect to what we call the scoping application, which talks about the site, the parameters of the site, what we're going to do when we complete a traffic impact study. We do that in order to gain preliminary feedback from PennDOT as to the site. That application was also submitted to the Township for review. We did receive not only a PennDOT scoping review on July 12th, we also received a Township review on the scoping application. That was July 31st of this year. Between July 31st and October 9th, we also received 2 other review letters, one review letter from the Township traffic engineer with respect to the site, another one from the Township engineer with respect to the civil engineering aspects, but also included some traffic comments as well. We've also had 2 meetings so far with St. Catherine's Church, with Monsignor and the principal of the school, to discuss some of the issues that they currently face on Aberdeen Avenue and some of their concerns with respect to the subject application. And what we've been doing, the first meeting was to introduce the project and to understand the issues. What we're trying to do is coordinate to determine if there are things that we can do to help alleviate some of the issues that the church and school currently face, and then some issues that they feel would be issues in the future if the project were to be constructed. A lot of those issues relate to pedestrian improvements, safety items to be addressed, not only for the church, but also obviously for the school children and the parents that are picking up and dropping off those children every day. At the second meeting, we met with the church again in October 2018. And at that meeting, the township traffic engineer was present, as well as one of the Radnor Township police officers, to coordinate between the township, the church, and ourselves to again talk about some of the items and some of the issues that the township experiences today, and then some of the throwing out some ideas and how we could address those issues. We've also completed a traffic study. That traffic study, as I hold it here, very voluminous, very great reading if anyone's looking to fall asleep one night. But there's a lot of information contained within that study. That study was submitted on October 9th to both the township and the PennDOT. We are awaiting a PennDOT review, which takes about 30 days, so we're hopeful to have that by the end of the week, if not early next week. But we did receive a review letter from the township traffic engineer dated October 26th that outlined some issues that they would like us to continue to explore throughout the process. As far as improvements are concerned, in addition to the access changes that we're proposing, one of the items that was requested by PennDOT at the very early stages of this project was the provision of a northbound right turn lane on Aberdeen Avenue. As everyone's familiar, Aberdeen Avenue is one lane in each direction. PennDOT had asked us to provide widening along the frontage of the property to provide for a separate right turn lane onto Lancaster Avenue. Obviously, with the addition of that right turn lane, we would now prohibit parking on that side of Aberdeen Avenue, which in my limited experience in being out at the site, I've noticed in the mornings, especially during school drop-offs and some of the early morning church services, there's a number of people that park along that east side of Aberdeen Avenue, which essentially take Aberdeen Avenue from a two-lane roadway to a one-lane roadway, whereas sometimes when school buses are coming down, you actually have to wait for that bus to come by or that car to come by before you can continue in your direction. So at the meeting with the church, the township traffic engineer suggested that be possible to restrict parking on the east side of Aberdeen Avenue and maybe shift it to the west side of Aberdeen Avenue, provided that sight distance for anyone turning right, coming eastbound on Lancaster Avenue, could still see someone coming up Aberdeen Avenue. So that's something we're going to continue to investigate. The church seemed amenable to that, but again, it's something that we'll continue to coordinate with them through the process. Two of the items in the township engineer's review letter relate to access. One of them being the access closest to Aberdeen Avenue on Lancaster Avenue, a right-in, right-out driveway that we're proposing. The township traffic engineer asked that either A, we eliminate that access, or at a minimum, allow for a right-in only, no right-out movements at this driveway, thereby requiring anyone that wanted to exit out onto Lancaster Avenue to come around back to the furthest driveway and make it a right to continue east on Lancaster Avenue. That's something that we'll continue to coordinate with the township traffic engineer. We're curious as to what PennDOT may say in that regard. So obviously we're awaiting PennDOT's review letter.
Excuse me one second.
Sure.
I recall in reading the letters and the discussions that went on, township engineer, traffic engineer asked you to look at a possible shared driveway access with Verizon or CBS, and that you were going to have those discussions. Have those discussions occurred?
Those discussions have not yet occurred. I personally had some concern with respect to the shared access concept, and I understand where the township traffic engineer is coming from. Absolutely, anytime you can decrease the number of access points on a roadway, especially a roadway like Lancaster Avenue, again, it's a benefit. We're doing that for the subject site as it is, reducing 4 curb cuts to 2 curb cuts, one of them being limited access.
Question.
Yes.
I'm kind of wondering, westbound traffic,
Yes.
how are you dealing with that? Cutting across, because your distance from the eastbound exit to the traffic light isn't that great, I don't think. So anyone exiting there, right? Because you're saying you can't exit, you can only exit right on the westbound one, right?
No, what the westbound access or the eastbound access, correct, it's enter only.
Right.
Right in
right,
only.
Right in, right out. So they can only go eastbound from the westbound one.
As
right,
we
the
have it
west side
currently
one.
shown,
So
yes.
that means all exits going west on Lancaster Avenue are going to exit the far one?
Or going
Or-
through, or Aberdeen.
Or exit out
Or
Aberdeen
Aberdeen?
and come to the
Okay.
traffic light.
And take advantage of that light on Lancaster Avenue. That's where the
Yes.
traffic
I mean,
is going to be going.
should you limit it as the only way out heading westbound is Aberdeen? I mean, I can't imagine people trying to make it out Lancaster Avenue, out the exit on Lancaster Avenue, heading west with the traffic light being so close to it, especially in the morning. I don't know how they're going to do that. Why? So if you do that, okay, if you say they can only exit out on Aberdeen, then you really only need the westbound entrance only, and then the other one would be exit right out, because then the only ones that are going to use the outbound one are going to head east on Lancaster Avenue. So why not have them come in only one way? And if they're going to go west on Lancaster Avenue, they got to go out Aberdeen to the traffic light and make a left.
So, I understand, it's a good point. What I would say, there are a couple things. One, I would say that keep in mind that there are 4 full access points today that serve the 2 gas station
Yeah, but I'm not
properties.
worried about today. I'm worried about when you're done. I don't care what's there today, because if you were worried about if what was there today was fine, Wawa wouldn't be here. I want to know what you're going to do on that site to make sure that people can get in and out safely. And I don't see how that's going to, I think you're making a real problem for westbound Lancaster Avenue out of Wawa.
Understood. And if I could just finish my thought,
Okay.
and maybe it'll help better answer the question. So there are 4 full access points that exist out there today. I believe this is BP. Yeah, the BP gas station only has access to Lancaster Avenue, whereas the corner gas station has 4 access points, 2 to Aberdeen, 2 to Lancaster Avenue. So there are multiple points, obviously, of egress on Lancaster Avenue where people are making left turns, and much closer to the signal, albeit. The nature of Lancaster Avenue is such that there are multiple access points serving multiple different properties all up and down Lancaster Avenue. And obviously, they have to contend with the lefts in and lefts out as well. If we were to limit the number of lefts being made out of this driveway, in other words, prohibit left turns out of the easternmost driveway and force everyone to Aberdeen, I would anticipate that there would be a significant backup on Aberdeen Avenue. And it would be very difficult during those peak hours for not only the residents that live along Midland and Pembroke and those areas to the south to get out, but also the school children and the parents picking up and dropping off their kids, because you would be forcing everyone that wants to go westbound on Lancaster Avenue to come out to Aberdeen. There's not a huge, there's not a significant distance from Lancaster Avenue to our southern property boundary where we have our driveway to allow for stacking so that all of those vehicles that desire to go west on Lancaster Avenue can do so. Furthermore, while we are, in your opinion, close to the signal, we've pushed the driveway far enough back and there are gaps in traffic. So when that light turns red on Lancaster Avenue and stops traffic, there is the ability for vehicles to exit out. That's one of the things that we've looked at in the traffic study. That's one of the things that was requested of us in the very beginning of this process. So I guess what I'm trying to say, it's a balancing act. There's no perfect situation, but I believe allowing the lefts out at that driveway, in addition to the fact that having a second means of ingress and egress to come out to the light is a benefit, because then you have the ability to split the traffic. The other thing to keep in mind at this store is what we call a front-back store. So there is an entrance to the store in the back of the facility, and there's an entrance to the store in the front of the facility. So by having these two means of ingress and egress to allow vehicles to travel in any direction they so choose, allows us to split the traffic up. So someone that just wants to come into the store and doesn't necessarily want to go in the front of the store to the gas pump area where there's usually more activity, they don't have to go back there. They have the ability to enter in this easternmost driveway and exit back out. We've completed the traffic study. We've done the analysis. We've shown the traffic volumes on Lancaster Avenue. We've shown what we anticipate to enter and exit that driveway. We've provided gap analysis. We provided a lot of information out there. And in my opinion, as a traffic engineer, I feel that the left out on the Lancaster Avenue is inappropriate, and especially the fact that we've pushed it as far back from the signal as we can.
Mr. Kunda, since we're on this, can I just add one thing? So I know we were going through the presentation, but the Aberdeen access area. So there's been a lot of consternation from the residents who live around there, the fear that folks heading westbound, they're going to go St. David's, Midland, Aberdeen to go in. So I'm not basing this on a traffic engineering standpoint, but what are your thoughts if that area became right out only? So there is no impetus, there's no benefit for anybody to make that circuitous route to go there. It's solely, all you can do is exit right on Aberdeen and go to the light. You cannot go left towards the school, towards Midland. How does that play into that, and would you consider that for this site?
So that was the second point that I was going to make about the access. That was the other item that's been discussed, in addition to limiting the right-in, right-out driveway to a right-in only at a minimum, or and the coordination of access with the AT&T, or I'm sorry, the Verizon and CVS properties to the east. The other item was discussion was the possibility of restricting lefts out of the Aberdeen driveway to limit the number of people that may exit out of the driveway and continue back through the residential area. I don't live back there, but the one negative that would be, yes, the one negative that I see is that anyone that's coming from that area, whether it be the residents, whether it be the residents further south, anyone going to or coming from the school, would be restricted from entering the Wawa and then being able to exit back out that way in any of the time periods, 24 hours a day. It would force everyone who lives back on Midland, or lives back Pembroke, or back in those roadways back there, or going back to the school, they would have to exit out the facility, either make a left at the light and come back around, or go back down east, make a right on Pembroke, make a right on Midland. So again, just as is the access with the left out on the Lancaster Avenue, it's a balancing act as to what we provide there. As I'd mentioned to the township traffic engineer, it's something that we can continue to coordinate on to determine what is the best option. Is it best to restrict lefts 24 hours a day? Is it best to provide peak hour restrictions? Is it best to leave it? But obviously that's something we're going to continue to coordinate on. I don't feel there's a significant amount of traffic making that left, but there is the ability to allow those people to make a left, and mainly for the vehicles that currently travel on Midland or live back in those neighborhoods.
So I do ask you to seriously consider that, because we've had other meetings with folks on Midland not about Wawa, and this comes up all the time. That's a huge concern. So if you do the right out only, you take away that concern. And the folks that want to go to Wawa, they're going to find their way there from Midland, from Pembroke, from wherever. Similarly to the entrance Mr. Falcone was talking about, so for the locals of us that use that car wash, you do have to make a left there sometimes. So you work your way out. But I think, again, not from a traffic engineering standpoint, but from benefiting the community, the folks in the immediate area would be much appreciative, and I believe the school would be too, if folks aren't going to be coming out of there and being able to make a left. Because the other concern is Aberdeen in and of itself is used to go from Conestoga to Lancaster, or from Lancaster to Conestoga. So you don't want people necessarily pulling in Wawa, making that left and going down Aberdeen to go to Conestoga Road. So again, I'm not basing it on your traffic study, I'm basing it on what we've heard from the folks who live there, from many of the surrounding roads, to seriously take a look at this and consider this. I think this would relieve a lot of angst from those
And
folks.
absolutely, and I apologize if I didn't portray the fact that I would seriously consider it. It's something, like I said, the Township Traffic Engineers has made comment on. It's something that we've discussed, and it's something that obviously we're willing to consider and will seriously consider.
While we're on that topic, I'd just like to make a comment on both of those restricted turns. If you were to restrict the turns as proposed by the residents and the township, you would impact only 2 blocks who couldn't take a left there. So anyone else could take a right, and they're going to end up going out to where they live. So you're going to impact the block behind Wawa and the block to the south in inconveniencing. So I think those are the people here telling you they don't want that turn.
Understood.
So keep that in mind. You're inconveniencing the people who are asking you not to do that. And the other thing too, with that right-hand turn, and of course you can make a left there now. You can also hold up about 10 cars waiting for you to make that left while everyone continues to come west, and it really, to no benefit, you can just go around the block. You can go out the other entrance. And I think that right turn lane, if you could consider lengthening it by extending it to the exit. I don't know if that's a possible option because you said there's not enough stacking. If you can continue it to the actual exit, that would be, I don't know if that's feasible or not, just something to put out there.
Sure. Typically, when we design a right turn lane, there's typically a taper associated with that.
I'm aware, but I see the geometry is tricky. So if that's something you could look at to see if you can get more cars stacked by not having that type of taper where it just began at the exit.
Sure. And
I don't know if that's even allowable, so
Sure,
I'm
sure.
just throwing it out there.
We'll absolutely look at that. One of the other items that was discussed was, is it more beneficial to provide for a left turn lane on northbound Aberdeen with a shared through right? There are
Which is also
benefits.
worth looking
There are
at, yes.
benefits with respect to that. Obviously, the biggest issue in regards to providing that improvement would be the fact that the widening would be necessary on the northeast corner of the intersection, a property that we do not own or control. Again, it's something that we're going to look into and determine whether or not we could provide that, because I do see a benefit to that. But again, we don't own or control that property. It is, if the project moves forward, it would be a quote-unquote competing use. So it's something that we will continue to look at. But as of now, we propose for the widening for the right turn lane, and we will look at seeing if we can extend that. And just going back to your original comment, again, we're absolutely going to look at the possibility of restricting the lefts out. But just as the residents have expressed their concern with the lefts out, when we met with the church expressed concerns with restricting the left out. So there are 2 schools of thought in that area with respect to whether we restrict the lefts or we don't restrict the lefts. So we're trying to take all of that into account and determine what works the best and how we can accommodate that.
But have you taken a look at your design itself to make the main entrance, which is the ingress egress on the east side of the lot, to make that would be like the most attractive area of your site? So from a traffic volume standpoint, a lot of the folks that are going to be coming in there are going to be taking advantage of the gas. So if you put the gas station on the east side of your plot and basically flip your plan, so you take the Wawa, put that over more towards Aberdeen, on Aberdeen Avenue. So this way you're creating more of a funnel for the traffic, where the user, myself, would want to probably enter for the gas, most convenient place. So this way you're taking a lot of the volume away from the subject areas. Have you guys ever thought about that?
So I understand that was another comment that was addressed in the Township Traffic Engineer's letter, and more related to the pedestrian pathways and the easiest way and fastest way and safest way to get pedestrians in and out of the facility, namely school children from the middle school, from the residents to the rear. And that same concept was discussed, was the possibility of flipping the store and the gas canopy. It's outside of my expertise, but what I can tell you is when you do that, The reason the gas canopy is at the corner, assuming the site had no constraints whatsoever, the reason why the canopy is on the corner is the visibility of the gas canopy, so that people know when they're approaching that that facility provides for gas. When you put it to the rear of the store, in between uses, you sometimes hide that. I'm not saying that's based on my experience in working on these type of facilities. But my understanding is, and Eric may be able to speak to this in more detail, but my understanding is the store is placed at the high point of the site, the higher point of the site. From a stormwater perspective, it allows the site to drain better. If you were to put the store on the Aberdeen Avenue side, what would happen is a lot of the stormwater would be draining towards the store. It would make it.
But you could solve from that through for site planning.
Again, it's outside of my expertise. That's just one of the concerns that I had understood from the site. Again, I think the way the site is laid out is we're providing for the main access to the rear. And again, it's not just for the gas canopy. This is a front-back store, so you'll have the ability to get in the front and the back. And we have this quote-unquote, what I'll call almost a jug handle at the intersection to allow for that flow to come in and circulate throughout the site.
But the main entrance right now for your site, forget about the right-hand turns going on to getting into your lot and out of your lot from Lancaster Avenue. The main focal point is between the gas stations and the main entrance to the Wawa, which is the entrance is on the west side of the Wawa building.
Mm-hmm.
Right here is the main. Sorry, right. This is the main area, just right by your main entrance. My thought would be if you have the main entrance on the east side of your building, that would take, instead of drive traffic more towards that side and keep it away from the west side or away from Aberdeen Avenue. That's where the people are going to park. That's where the people are going to drive in. Mm-hmm. And it's the easiest pathway to get into your store.
So, and I understand, your point in that. What I can say, though, is that if we are going to ultimately end up making the changes to the access that have been requested, we're essentially doing the same thing. We're only going to have a right-in only here if we restrict the rights out. If we restrict the lefts out on this driveway, you're only going to be able to make a right out. You'll still have the ability to make the left in or the right in back from the residential area.
You're solving for the least of your problem.
I think what he's trying to point out is, and I think it's a very good point, is if you were to switch the two uses, you now have a store on the corner instead of a gas station on the corner. And that's both more aesthetic and safe for pedestrians such as school children who want to go buy a drink after school. They don't have to walk through an area where cars are sometimes careless when you're looking, which gas pump is open, and you're not really looking for a fourth grader. And this is a different location than you may not be used to, because all of these middle school kids and all these St. Catherine's kids, they're all walking around after school, and they don't have the same judgment an adult would have walking around. So just in the best interest of everyone, I hope you at least look at that.
Absolutely. As far as some of the other things that were requested of us that we are providing, obviously we discussed the widening on Aberdeen Avenue to provide for the right turn lane as depicted on the plan. We're also going to upgrade the pedestrian facilities not only around the facility but also at the intersection of Aberdeen and Lancaster Avenue. We've also agreed to install or provide for traffic adaptive equipment at the intersection. It's our understanding that the township currently has a project to provide traffic adaptive on Lancaster Avenue that extends from the Radnor Township line west to the St. David's Financial Center, Shopping Center intersection. And we have agreed to provide for the traffic adaptive equipment at that intersection so that that intersection as well as the other two in between can eventually be connected to that system. Furthermore, As I'd mentioned, based on our conversations with the church, we are looking to see what enhancements, what improvements that we can provide off-site, more so at the intersection of Midland and Aberdeen, along Midland, to help, again, solve some of the issues that exist out there today with the church and the school, and then help to provide for enhanced safety in the future. So essentially, I believe that is it in regards to the traffic at this point.
Okay, I appreciate everybody in the audience wants to ask the questions, and that's coming up. And the experts will be here for the applicant, and you'll be able to have a dialogue. That's what happened at the September meeting. I think it's a useful methodology. So we'll get to that, but we can't all yell out because we won't get done.
What is your conclusion? What impact does the traffic have on the surrounding intersections? Does it diminish them? Are you increasing the traffic?
So there is an increase in traffic, obviously. We did conduct traffic counts at the 2 existing gas stations. We have generated the amount of traffic associated with the Wawa, and then basically looked at the delta between the two. So there will be an increase in traffic, I believe somewhere in the range of 84 to 113 new trips during the subject peak hours. And one of the things that's a little different about this traffic study than normal is that we've looked at 4 time periods in this study. We've looked at the AM peak, we looked at the PM peak, but extended PM peak. And if you're familiar with the peaks, typically the AM peak is between 7 and 9, the PM peak's between 4 and 6. We also looked at Saturday afternoon peak between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. But that's a request of the township. Through their review and the scoping application, they asked us to extend those hours to account for the fact that there are a number of schools in the area, the fact that there are churches in the area. So we extended our AM peak hours. We also counted not only the school afternoon peak hour, but the traffic peak hour, which is between 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock in the afternoon. We looked at the Saturday midday peak, and then we also coordinated with the 2 churches to find out their peak on a Sunday morning for their peak services, and counted a Sunday as well to determine the amount of traffic. So over the course of those time periods is when you would see, as I mentioned, some of the increases in traffic.
Excuse me, one other thing. Did you look at anything relative between 11 and 1? Because I would think between 11 and 1, that would be a pretty peak period for a Wawa. I mean, it's...
So there is typically a what you'll call a lunchtime rush, but my experience has been that the actual peak, the time that you see the most activity, is during the AM hours at these type of facilities, which we have provided for. I know there was some discussion at the community development meeting back in September whether or not we need to look at the lunchtime peak hour as well. And obviously, that's something that we can look into, and if it's required of us, we can look at it. But again, I think we've captured the peak in the AM peak hour based on not only the traffic on Lancaster Avenue, but also the traffic anticipated for these type of developments, which is typically the AM peak hours, the heaviest volumes. But there will be an increase in traffic. Obviously, you know, a lot of what we're doing is more traffic signal related. There will be an impact on some of the intersections, not a significant impact. I'm not going to sit here and say that there will be no impact. There will be an impact at some of the intersections, but one of the things to keep in mind and is associated with these type of facilities is the fact that they are very, what we call pass-by traffic oriented. And if you're familiar or not with that term, what that means is the majority of traffic that associates with these type of facilities, that enters and exits these type of facilities, are traffic that's already on the roadway. So what that means is someone that's traveling eastbound on Lancaster Avenue today, that's coming by the site that may not enter the BP or may not enter the Sunoco gas station, but is traveling eastbound on their way to work in the morning. Now that the Wawa is there, would travel eastbound, enter the facility, get their coffee, gas, whatever it may be, and then exit right out. 76% of the traffic that enters and exits these type of facilities is what we classify pass-by traffic. And pass-by traffic is traffic that's already on the roadway. What that means is 24% of the traffic that enters and exits these type of facilities is new to the area. It's someone who is traveling westbound on Lancaster Avenue that says, oh, on my way home, I got to pick up a gallon of milk. I'm going to pick up my gallon of milk, and then I'm going to make a right out and go back home. That's where you see the impact on the roadway network is the new trips, not necessarily the pass-by traffic. So there will be an impact. However, there's limited amount of improvement that you can make to Lancaster Avenue. It is what it is, unfortunately. There's a number of facilities, buildings, businesses, offices, homes that exist on Lancaster Avenue that are close to the intersection, that have multiple driveways, so it's very difficult to provide for capacity adding improvements along Lancaster Avenue. So one of the things that, when you have a situation like that, one of the things you look to do is improve the signal timing operations to provide that efficiency. And one of the things that the township is doing in that regard is the traffic adaptive system, which I mentioned, which has proven to provide an efficiency along roadway corridors such as Lancaster Avenue. So beyond that, like I said, there will be an impact. We're trying to minimize the impact to the extent possible. And a lot of that relates to what we're doing with the access and how we're trying to get vehicles in and out of the facility.
I'll ask if the chair wishes to comment on the consultants' reports now, or do you?
You mean have staff make their comments? Yeah. Are you done on your side?
We're done with our initial presentation outside of commenting on what staff feedback
Okay.
they gave us in the review letters.
Okay. So we'll go to staff.
Okay.
Well, traffic is what we've just been on, and maybe it's out of order, but I'd like to hear, I think, from Amy first.
Okay. I'm not sure if you want to ask questions or if there's anything that you need me to clarify on the review letters that we provided, or are there some things that you would
I think it'd probably be a good idea for you to walk through it for everyone who's here.
walk through?
Walk through your comments.
Okay. We'll start with the TIS.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's up on the screen. That's the October 26th, page 86 of the, I'm not sure if it's the updated package or not. No, I don't have access to the screen. So the first couple pages are just setting up the summary. I'm not sure if you want me to go into that detail to identify what the, I'm sorry, it looks like there's questions up there. Is there something?
Is it possible to just pull up, can we have, no?
I don't have access to that.
We're not hooked to the screen. Or Amy's not hooked to the screen.
If somebody has a paper copy, it could certainly be moved up there and worked through. I don't have a paper copy. No, I'm not.
If I may suggest, there are a lot of comments, so if Amy can just give an overview of what a TIS scoping application is, and then maybe pick up on the highlights. That way, I don't think it's worthwhile to go line by line by line by line on each individual comment. If the commission has a specific question on one, absolutely stop her, but my recommendation is we just move along in that fashion. That's okay with the chair and the commission.
I agree.
Okay.
Okay, well,
one
it's
of
not
the-
in focus.
I'm sorry, what?
You have to pull it over. See, that's what we're looking at. The other way.
There is no letter.
I don't think the letter's up there right now.
Oh, Oh, never mind.
Yeah, so we're just going to have Amy step through it per the chair. So I think that's best serves everybody. That's my recommendation.
Is that okay? All right, one of the things that I do have a concern with is the way the distribution and assignment was derived from what they call the existing street patterns. We've asked for this a couple of times, and the responses have been that they feel that the existing site is not comparable to what is being utilized with the Wawa. We disagree with that. We believe that because of the pass-by characteristics that were actually brought forth in the traffic study and the type of use that it is, that we believe it should be based on the volume movements that are coming out of the site presently.
You're saying for the existing condition, or?
For the distribution of the Wawa trips that are associated with the new site.
Okay.
One of the other things that we had concerns with, I guess I'm looking at the review letter, the response to our review, and anywhere that our comments brought forth something that they didn't agree with us, those are probably the best points to perhaps discuss today. So I just discussed the notion that the distribution and assignment should be based on the site driveways for the existing site. The next section that I had concerns with was looking at the left turn phases. Those were supposed to be performed at any of the intersections that were being studied. The response was that left turn phases are not permitted without separate dedicated left turn lanes. But that comment is actually related to the intersections that were being studied on Lancaster Avenue, the minor streets that had left turn pockets. So anywhere that there were left turn lanes, we were looking at determining whether or not arrows could be provided on those intersections or anywhere that we have left turn lanes.
So to clarify to Amy's point, if I'm correct, so instead of a dedicated right turn only lane, there could be a left on Aberdeen approaching Lancaster, there could be a dedicated left-hand turn signal for that. That's what you meant by the approach.
Sort of like the farmer's market intersection as you leave the market going downhill in Conestoga.
I'm not sure.
It's either a left straight and a
Okay,
right
yes.
only.
Roger says yes. The next item that I think bears discussion is requiring just a right-in from Lancaster Avenue. And if the residents are interested in prohibiting lefts into from Aberdeen and out of Aberdeen, and also rights in from Aberdeen, meaning that there would only be rights exiting north on Aberdeen towards Lancaster Avenue, that may be something you may want to consider. And again, as Steve pointed out, that isn't necessarily from a traffic engineering perspective. This is something to address the concerns that residents had with cut-through traffic occurring on those nearby residential streets.
I have one question. We
Yes.
did all those intersections and nobody mentioned at the time that we should look at Bloomingdale and Lancaster?
No, I don't think that that one was brought up for discussion.
Because it is the other Wawa on Lancaster. Okay.
And is your thought maybe to pick up the traffic volumes that are occurring at those sites? Is it just, does it also have gas pumps? So I think the problem is that when you start mixing this type of use and comparing it to just a retail use, it becomes a little bit more difficult. And depending on how far away that gas station is and the fact that it's not, is it directly on Lancaster Avenue? Yeah, okay, down at Bloomingdale?
I don't know.
I know which one you're talking about,
Yeah.
yes, okay.
I'm thinking you get gas once or maybe twice a week, but you might go to Wawa every day for coffee.
That could be an option, certainly. Thank you.
That'd be playing more into that 11 to 1 traffic pattern.
It could produce more information as far as that
Yeah.
goes, yes.
And that one will probably, I don't know, I would probably think they'll close that one down if this one opens up.
But also with Wawa's gas price is usually a lot more competitive than most of the other retailers out there. So at least from my observation on Westchester Pike going out towards Westchester. And also I noticed is that, for example, on County Line Avenue, was it the Getty, which is traditionally a lot cheaper than most of the other gas stations. There's always a line trying to getting into that place. So I think it's like when you're looking at traffic counts or whatever, I think you also have to focus with what you were just reiterating. The fact is that you have a retail component, then you have a gasoline component, and then I think people are going to go out of their way to get gas at Wawa, from my experience.
I just wanted to point out that a lot of the data that is included in ITE, the Institute of Traffic Engineers, is actually based on the Wawa site. So those types of, the fact that they're a cheaper gas product and it's the combination of the retail and gasoline is taken into consideration for that. And then after we had the one development meeting to discuss the project, and it was brought up that maybe a midday analysis could be performed. I did go into ITE to see if data was available, because most of the time we do our analysis based on the AM, PM, Saturdays and Sundays during the peak hours. And there was no data available for that midday. So it might be a little difficult to be able to get the trip generation characteristics for that information. Not impossible, but it would take considerable effort to get that information. One of the other, I think that's the majority of the comments from the traffic study.
Amy, can I ask a question?
Sure.
The right only in eastbound, as opposed to a both right in, right out, would that improve the ability to get off of Lancaster Avenue quickly and not back traffic up into the light?
I do like having a right in, right where that's being proposed on the west side. I think that it eliminates some of the conflicts that can occur at the exit driveway that's more to the east. What it does is it's going to help produce some of those gaps, a little bit more additional gaps by separating those movements. I think anybody that's coming into the Wawa site is probably going to turn right before the building rather than after that building, since even if they're coming in for gas or coming in for the retail. It depends, honestly, on what the on-site configuration is. I think eliminating that right out actually would provide a better benefit for those vehicles that are entering the site, because they're not competing with getting around the queues at the gas pumps. They're able to get into those parking spaces more easily along that western side of the building. So that was why I've been kind of holding on to eliminating the right out at that point.
I have a quick question for you. For this particular site, do you have, when the trucks come in for refueling, it looks like some of these turns might be tough for them. What is the primary way they're getting in? And then a lot of times when you're at Wawa, there's a lot of people there getting their breakfast in the morning. They're going to be out on crews where there's trucks involved, landscaping, deliveries, big trucks like that. How are they getting in and out? And how does the choice of which ones you close off and which ones you don't close off allow them to get in and out?
Right. As far as the fuel deliveries, I believe that the study identified that the WB50 would be the largest size that would be coming on site. And I believe that the first templates that we showed, or we received, showed the movement coming in through the Aberdeen entrance and making a left from Lancaster. But that'll have to be revised. So I haven't seen how this is going to handle that. But we did have discussions about restricting fuel service during the peak hours, so that they had a limitation on when those fuel deliveries would occur, if I remember correctly. Is that correct, Matt?
We did not show any of the fuel delivery trucks coming off of Aberdeen. They were coming in and off of Lancaster Avenue, I believe. Sorry.
Because the people at home can't hear that.
Apologize. I believe the truck turning templates, there were templates that were included in the land development plans. I believe what they show was the fueling truck coming in and off Lancaster Avenue, circulating around and exiting back out. There was a template that showed a delivery
right.
truck coming down Aberdeen and making a left in, but obviously the residents of
The template's mismarked. It says fuel delivery tanker, and it's showing that movement making a right, and that's why I thought it
Gotcha.
was. But now that I'm looking at it and the details, it's not
Right.
a fuel truck.
Okay.
Also,
But anyway, those retail deliveries would not be occurring at that location, so they would just be providing us more templates and making adjustments on site as needed to make sure it would work.
Sure, and just to piggyback on that, one of the things that we're required to do is prove to the township, prove to Amy that the trucks can circulate the site without conflict, and that's also something that we must provide for PennDOT due to the fact that Lancaster Avenue is a PennDOT-owned and controlled roadway, and if we're fortunate enough to move forward, we would seek a highway occupancy permit from PennDOT. It's one of the things that they'll require us to show.
I think with the idea of moving the Wawa on the west part is to the east part, I think that would help the flow coming off of Lancaster Avenue. Because people coming in trying to find a place to, an empty gas thing, they'll be coming in and keep moving, as opposed to stopping here, and figuring out where am I going to go? Am I going to find my empty gas pump? I think by moving it, that helps that also. The flow of traffic coming off of Lancaster Avenue, okay, is now going to be at the west end of the site, the east end of the site. Because most of the traffic's going to be probably coming that way, as opposed to coming off of westbound traffic making a left in. They'll be coming in and they'll see it, but most of the traffic's coming the other way, so they're going to come onto the site and start looking right away, so they're going to be backing up traffic on Lancaster Avenue for the short period. So I think maybe moving it on the east side, the west side would help also. You see what I mean?
I believe I understand what you're saying. Again, it's something that we'll look at. All I can say is that I've been involved in a couple hundred of these facilities in my career, and the situation or the configuration that you see there is a very similar configuration to a number of these facilities that we've done in the past. And I don't know that there's been situations where, as you had mentioned, people are coming in and they're backing up traffic because they're trying to find an empty gas pump. But it's not to say that it couldn't occur. And obviously, the configuration, we've heard from a number of the members this evening that they wanted us to investigate more fully the proposition of flipping the store into gas pumps, which is something we will look at.
It happens at Bryn Mawr Avenue. They don't have a gas pump, but they have the front parking lot on the corner like you have it. And Lancaster or County Line Road is backed up with cars sitting in the intersection sometimes.
I'm sure there is, and there's a number of the older, what we call legacy stores, where there's very limited parking and the drive aisles are much narrower than you would normally see at these type of facilities, where you do have that situation where someone's trying to come in. I can name a number of Wawa facilities or convenience store facilities where you have that old type of configuration where it's difficult to get in and out, and sometimes you do have people backing up onto the roadway trying to figure out where they're going to park or how they're going to get in and those type of things. I wouldn't disagree with that at all.
Okay, let's keep rolling the ball here so we can get to a good spot. Amy, do you have anything else for us at this point?
No, I think you've addressed everything and brought up some very good points. So if you don't have any other questions, I think I'm done.
And we can come back to you, obviously, so.
I won't be going anywhere.
Okay. Roger, you knew I was going to ask for you next.
So most of the items that are in my letter, the applicant has agreed to comply. What we can quickly review is the few waivers that they're requesting. And one of the waivers that we should probably discuss a little bit is the width of the entrance aisles, and I'd like the applicant to they explained it at the last meeting, and I'd like them to go through that again as to why they're asking for wider entrance aisles coming off of both Aberdeen and Lancaster for the two spots. And for just for the benefit of the crowd, they're by code is 25 feet with 35 feet at the curb line, with the radii that comes in on the curb line.
So the main reason for the wider driveways, and for the waiver is to allow for truck turning the trucks that are servicing this site in and out of the site without hindering the other traffic coming through the site. You have the right in, right out, which is the widest driveway that we're proposing. So obviously, because of the pork chop island that you have in the middle, we call it a pork chop island, concrete island, that forces that to be wider. The other two driveways are also wider than that which is required, and again, that's for the truck turning to safely ingress and egress through the site, as was recommended when we first started laying out this plan in accordance to really meet the PennDOT requirements.
And while you're there, another waiver that they're requesting is a reduction in the width of the delivery berth area, which is along Lancaster on the north side. And if you could point that out and point out the dimensions that you're requesting as opposed to the 14-foot aisle width.
So that loading zone is in this location. The zoning code allows it to be 12 feet wide. The saldo requires it to be 14 feet wide. We're proposing it to be 12.9 feet wide, so it's in compliance with the zoning. It's more than adequate for that which is required for the truck. No vehicle can be, by PennDOT rules and regulations, no vehicle can be wider than 8 feet wide. So 12.9 feet is more than adequate for the loading zone to access the site. We're limited in depth on the site as far as you have the 15-foot buffer in the rear that we're trying to maintain. You have a pinch point at this corner. I guess it would be the southwest corner of the site, adjacent to the building, as well as the drive aisles and parking proposed for the site. And then on the north site, to maximize the green area in that location and maintain the setback which is proposed there.
So, and as I stated, most of the other comments that were in my letter are will comply or things that we're going to work through that they're going to be able to meet the ordinance. The stormwater will not be finalized until the final plan submission, second time through, and that's all dependent on if any of these structures or anything within the site moves or changes. But they've at this point show they can meet the ordinance, and in fact, as they stated, exceed the stormwater ordinance for this site.
Roger, have you had any discussions about flipping the site? Any ongoing discussions?
About flipping the site?
In other words, moving the store to the corner?
No, I have not.
Okay. Well, I think that's one of the things that really has to be talked about. And, you know, for me, that would be a big factor in going forward. That has to be fully explored. Do you have anything else for us, Roger?
No, that would be all I have unless you have specific comments.
Well, we may want to come back to you again because I think the public is going to bring up things that need to be discussed. Now, in terms of rules for public, please try for 5 minutes. And if there's so many of you, you can say the same thing several times, and it's not that we don't hear. I can tell that, you know, everybody's upset because there's 50 people here, or 40 anyway. But be cognizant of the fact that everybody deserves to be heard, but just keep it to 5 minutes. Thank you to Susan.
Hello,
Nice
Susan
to see you.
Stern. I miss you all. I sat in your seat for 8 years, Mr. Nat. I'm not going to get into how
You need to
unfortunate-
introduce yourself. Just
I'm sorry,
not-
Susan Stern, Midland Avenue.
Fortunate to know you are, Susan. Some people may not.
Well,
Hard
that's
to believe,
true.
But
I know a lot of them. In any event, there was an unfortunate zoning determination that, unfortunate in my opinion, that this is not an expansion of the outdoor retail use. So unfortunately, rather than going before the zoning hearing board for a special exception, it's before you as saldo. Why that's unfortunate to me is that some of the requirements under special exception is that this project not unduly impact the health, safety, welfare of the surrounding community. And, as you all know, the SALDO process is very different. But this is an expansion. And here are the ways in which it's an expansion and why some of the things I'm going to touch on in a minute matter so much to me. No one asked the height of the existing canopy. No one asked the size of the existing gas canopy. There's been a lot of talk and focus on the number of fuel pumps, but if you were to look at the existing canopy size, and I tried to rough guesstimate it, the one at the corner of Aberdeen, I think is probably in the 25 by 40 range. I think this is somewhere in the range of 50 by 100. I could be off on the numbers there, but I'm pretty sure it's 100 feet long. 100-foot long canopy adjacent to the South Wayne Historic District. So, a lot of the people are here tonight because we care about traffic. We care about traffic tremendously through our neighborhood, but we also care about our property values and the degradation of our property values having a 24-hour operation. So there's another expansion of the retail, outdoor retail use. This will be a gas station that will operate 24 hours a day adjacent to people's homes. Now, that actually doesn't exist in Radnor. The Sunoco across the street, open 24 hours a day. Lots of gas stations in Radnor, even the Wawa down the street, open 24 hours a day. Not adjacent to a residential property. Not adjacent to a residential street. So that's a big difference. I would like to see the applicant get rid of the 24-hour-a-day operation. There were a lot of pictures tonight showing light spill. And the reason I'm asking about the height of the existing canopy and the height and the size of the existing canopy and the pictures that they showed is that my contention is if they would get the canopy down to the existing canopy height, that light spill, the light glare, the light glow, whatever anybody wants to call it, would be that much less of an impact in our neighborhood. If the operation is not a 24-hour operation, the impact on this would be far, far, far less. You all know that I understand SALDO enough to understand they're asking for very little. One of the things they're asking for, though, in terms of a waiver, the extra wide driveway on Aberdeen Avenue. The applicant just acknowledged that the reason that they want the extra wide is to get the trucks in. Please do not give them the waiver for an extra wide driveway on Aberdeen. That will allow trucks to come in. So I'm kind of jumping around, but there are things about this that are just really disconcerting. At the community development meeting last month, the applicant said that they don't have the intention of selling high-speed or high-capacity fuel, diesel fuel. Please get that. Ask for the applicant to give that in writing as a condition of approval. You all know, I know, it doesn't matter what's said, it's mattered what's written down as a condition of approval. So please ask them to conform to that and agree not to do high-capacity or high-speed diesel fuel pumps here. This project is about attracting business to this corner. The applicant acknowledged tonight, which is actually kind of a big deal in my opinion. It's my understanding that Wawa applicants very seldom like to acknowledge an increase in traffic. They like to talk about that pass-by traffic. But the applicant actually acknowledged tonight that they are expecting an increase of 113 additional trips in the peak hours. Each peak hour, AM and PM, this is going to attract more traffic. They've acknowledged it. There's a lot of talk tonight about what to do about that traffic. I don't know that there is a lot because the applicant also said, can't really do anything about the service and the traffic on Lancaster Avenue. But we can ask them to not bring that traffic 24 hours a day. So that's one thing. This thing about stormwater and the hotspot. There's a project diagonally across the street. It's the old, where the Rite Aid is. That project came before the Planning Commission right as I got on. Skip, you and I would remember that. They didn't end up conforming to doing any stormwater because the ground was contaminated and they didn't want to have to do any, Superfund cleanup kinds of things. Hearing tonight talk about that this is a designated hotspot, does that mean that they don't have to do some ground cleanup? Why not ask them to conform to I don't know that all the details of the PA Tank Act, but, things like cleaning up the ground before you do a redevelopment would be really nice. That would add something to the community. We are not at a point any longer where we can afford to bypass or not do the ultimate stormwater management.
Can I address that quickly? Just
Sure.
so, soil contamination or issues with existing tanks are completely separate than what the stormwater hotspot is.
Oh, okay, thank
The
you.
stormwater ordinance, the current stormwater ordinance addresses certain uses as hotspots, and one of them would be like a parking lot or someplace where you would store vehicles, or and that's what's considered a hotspot. The runoff is the hotspot, not the soil that's existing on the site. That's a separate issue, and if they find that there's contamination of the soil, DEP regulates that, and that's completely separate than what the stormwater is.
Roger, thank you for clarifying that. Actually, that it reminded me, speaking of the tanks, reminded me of another expansion of use. They didn't talk about this tonight, but in terms of them going down to, I think they said 12 pumps, what they didn't mention tonight is that they're increasing their tank capacity underground by 50%. I think they're going from somewhere in the range of 50,000 gallons underground to about 75,000. So there's, even though there will be fewer pumps there, it's an increase. They're going to increase it. The last thing, and I don't have a set answer on this. I could go either way. I don't think that the right-hand turn lane makes sense. And here's the reason I don't think it. Well,
Which road?
the right-hand turn, the dedicated right on Aberdeen, generally speaking, when you widen the road, people drive faster. And, I would wonder if by widening the road there, with the intention of going east on Lancaster, if people will end up driving a little faster down Aberdeen than they should. And I also think that in terms of the neighborhood behind this, South Wayne, if you provide access for people on this property to go west, then they will be less likely to come back through the neighborhood. I'm not sure that I think a no left-hand turn lane is going to really, no left-hand exit through the back, through South Wayne is really going to do this. Providing a way for people to go left on Lancaster, maybe not even with a lane, but perhaps with a turn signal, a dedicated light there, would disincentivize people from cutting through the back neighborhoods to go further west on Lancaster. This is a shame. There's 40 or 50 people out here tonight because, this is really going to change. The whole look of the corner will be very different, and the whole look of the neighborhood. And I know there's lots of people who think that what's there now is unattractive. The applicant really is really welcome to beautify it without bringing on additional traffic. You really are. That would really be okay. Redevelop it in a way that doesn't bring on this kind of traffic. This is intended to drive traffic in Lancaster, on Lancaster, to attract traffic. And it's going to do that, and it's going to have some unintended consequences. And I would just, it's unfortunate. I'm glad that Wawa met with with Monsignor Browers and St. Catherine's. It would be nice if they would have met with the neighbors. They didn't do that. That would have been nice, so that we could maybe have talked through some of these things. It's not too late. I would urge you in the ways that you are able to be rigorous with them, because it's going to impact all of us. So thank you.
I just want to make one comment to that. Skip, I saw you nodding your head. We had 2 meetings with neighbors before community development. We heard their concerns. There were 2 meetings with neighbors before community development. There's many neighbors present there. We made a presentation. They made comments just like they're making this evening.
Just out of curiosity, straw
Can you
poll.
clarify what you mean by before community development? At that same event,
Community
or
development meeting.
at that same night?
Correct.
So not a separate
Those
with the neighbors
meetings were
only?
called to meet so that the neighbors could make comment. That is why community development had those meetings. And we had 2 of them, and the neighbors were present. There was many of you present. There were.
Having a meeting here at the same time or right after is not effective.
Yeah, I think you've been in front of this board and dealt with the residents of Radnor Township to know that the quickest way to get something done with the least amount of adversity is to meet with the neighbors. I think in the long run, in my years, and you've been around as long as I have, that meeting with the neighbors individually, setting it up in a separate location, I think you get more done. That way, when you don't get blindsided and they don't get blindsided. And you know that because you've done it a million
Sure,
times.
but Charlie, that's what I thought we were
Yeah.
doing when we met with community development. The neighbors were.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I
right.
think what you got to do is you got to contact, get a spokesperson or two and say, look, when do you want to meet? We can do it this, and then present it. I think that would go a long way.
Okay.
My name's Doug Blasey. I live at 215 Upland Way, so not too far away. I guess I'd just make two quick comments. One, it strikes me that there are really two cross streets in the core of town that go north and south, and one is North and South Wayne, and the other is Aberdeen. And so it's not just to Lancaster, but it's also from Conestoga to King of Prussia side. And when I go to either of those, the conflict between left turns and through traffic is great. So it seems to me we are exacerbating the tension on this intersection because they're coming out of the Sunoco on the north side, coming out of the Rite Aid. I see it all the time, just 4 or 5 cars backed up and only 3 or 4 getting through on a light change because of the left turn conflicts. So that's just a comment. And I noticed on their report, meaning the October 9th report, they talked about 104 new trips. And then the discussion here was approximately 110 new trips. So that's comparable. But where does that number come from? It strikes me, if you think of all the gas pumps there now, and so we're selling gas again, are we only going to sell 110 more cups of coffee a day out of this store? So what more, that seems to me incredibly low in terms of what would
It's
be
not per
attractive to this
day.
site. Pardon?
It's not per day, it's per peak hour. It's not the whole day, 100.
I think it was 114 increase at the peak hour.
Oh, okay, so is it total trips during the weekday only peak hour?
I think our traffic expert could comment, like, for,
And so how does
it's
just...
something like 4,000 trips a week, right?
No, it's more like 4,000 trips a day.
Oh.
Or in and out of these type of facilities. But as I'd mentioned, 76% of those
Are driving.
vehicles already on the roadway. And obviously, there's some vehicles in and out of that facility today.
Yeah, it's not 110.
It's about 4,000
That's a lot. I mean,
trips. And a trip is, just to clarify, just to clarify, a trip is one vehicle in and another trip is that same vehicle out. So essentially in the course of a day, if you have 4,000 trips, you have 2,000 cars over a 24-hour period.
Okay. And I guess my question is that purely a theoretical calculation from I think I understood the math. He said 74% of the traffic is pass-by traffic, so 26% is the new. Where does it come from? I mean, 4,000 is a lot at that intersection, I guess is what I'm saying, and I think it can destroy that intersection. But
So the information used to determine the number of vehicles enter and exit the facility is based on data that has been collected by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, or the ITE. What they've done is they've compiled data that's been collected at existing facilities specific to this use, compiled that data so that as a traffic engineer, when we're looking at a future site, we can determine the amount of traffic that would be generated by that site. And that's the same group or same entity that we would utilize for any type of land development, any type of building that would occur.
Good evening. Bradley Mortensen, 325 Pembroke. So I do want to point out that he just pointed out that the data that he's using for traffic is not site-specific, but in fact generic. It has nothing to do with the existing site as it is. I think we can all acknowledge that Lancaster Avenue throughout the entire township is a traffic nightmare at this point. It is backed up constantly all day. You're now going to, being asked to put a facility in to the township that is merely going to increase traffic. It is going to increase the volume in these neighborhoods and along Lancaster and Aberdeen that is already backed up constantly. It is, if you look at Aberdeen in the morning, it is almost impossible to get through that light without it rotating through 2 or 3 times, just from a backup. You're going to now remove parking, which at least is people going to church or something like that, so the neighborhood tolerates it. But it is a major cut-through street, just like South Wayne Avenue is. You're going to take the site, and if you look at each traffic pattern and you envision it further than what Wawa is telling you, ultimately, tremendous amount of traffic circulates back into the neighborhood. The concept of making a left turn out of that driveway is absurd. It is very, very, very difficult to make a left turn out of the CVS, which is another 100 feet down. So the gaps caused by the traffic, potentially caused by the right turn requirement in there, are not going to be significant enough. So there's going to be more accidents, is basically what's going to happen. There's not enough timing and space to do that. So most people who want to go westbound will have one choice, and one choice only. They will make a right. If they're prudent, they'll make a right. But then that leads them to Pembroke, then a right on Midland. You don't want to go through the Aberdeen intersection, so you go all the way down Midland to the middle school, or you go up to St. David's Road and swing around onto South Wayne Avenue.
Or Luella.
Beg pardon?
Maybe not Luella. That's not that.
Okay.
Yeah, you could keep going on Midland.
Well, you can go to Midland or you can go to St. David's Avenue, I'm sorry. So either one of those will ultimately increase traffic that has already been increased over the last 10 years due to the middle school and other factors. And people are frankly trying to avoid Lancaster Avenue, and they're making use of Midland and St. David's already. Now, so making a left out is difficult. Making a right drives the cars into the neighborhood. Coming along Lancaster Avenue westbound, you're going to make a left. There's already problems making a left constantly off of Lancaster. It just stacks the traffic back all the way to the Blue Route. Or you can go out to the light, which is the same problem as making the left into the left turn line is coming into Aberdeen. Already a jammed intersection. Now it's going to be slowed down by the traditional way of moving into the intersection, sitting there, waiting till the red light comes, then cutting through. At the same time, you're having children walk from all over town across Lancaster to go to St. Catherine's or going to the middle school. These problems are not solvable in this site. You can't say, if you're going to allow left turns out, you're going to drive tons of cars into our neighborhood, which is already dealing with the problems of parking and traffic. If you go, so there's not a solution at this site. Why? Because it's talking about 4,000 trips a day.
Not new trips, 4,000 total.
4,000 trips, but if you look at the numbers, by his own generic status amounts. He's talking about a 24% increase. Right? So that's 1,000 trips a day. And that's generic numbers, not actual numbers. It's based on traffic studies all around the country. I would submit to you that that is far more traveled a street at present than we have seen, than many places that are part of formulating that database. The lighting.
Okay, remember we're trying for R5.
Okay, I'm sorry if I've exceeded that. Let me just say the lighting. The lighting is artist depiction. Of course it's going to look like it's all right. It's a huge 100-foot canopy with lights underneath. It's going to radiate into our neighborhood. It's already a problem with the existing lighting. Now we're going to add some more. For what? They're putting a facility here with 55 parking spots. Don't be misled by any of the other nonsense they're giving you. You don't build, no businessman builds a facility with 55 parking spots and puts this kind of money into it if they don't think they're going to drive traffic. And they're going to drive a heck of a lot more traffic than Sunoco did or BP does for its gas. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chip Addis. I live in South Wayne. Did I understand you correctly to say that this side of the Wawa was going to be a loading zone? So we're going to permit a loading zone on Lancaster Avenue?
Not on Lancaster, on the Lancaster Avenue side, but not on the street.
Not on this, I understand it's not on the street, but on that side. So what is this side of the building going to look like facing Lancaster Avenue?
There
Do we
are
have-
elevation studies that they have that show sides.
Right.
Not much.
Ugly, I think,
Yeah,
is
well,
the-
that's why they
thank you.
have. That's why
Yes.
there's a buffer there too.
Right, so.
The trees are supposed to block the view of the loading.
Right, so is there any way of pushing this building back?
You can make the building smaller.
Okay, there you go.
But
That's what we're going to look at from Lancaster Avenue. Which one is it that we're going to be looking at?
This one would be from Lancaster Avenue.
That's what we're going to look at on Lancaster Avenue. I mean, we can't have this in Radnor Township. We can't have it. Plus, I don't know, are there going to be trucks that are sitting there unloading their goods, taking it into the Wawa from that location throughout the day? Is that what's going to happen? Isn't that where the deliveries are going to enter the store? Yeah, that's probably what's going to happen. So there's going to, not only are we going to have to look at this, but we're going to have to look at delivery trucks sitting there on Lancaster, not on Lancaster Avenue, but on this site up against Lancaster Avenue, delivering their goods. Please, don't allow that to happen. Thank you.
Additional public comment?
Glenn Bernabe, I'm a resident on Midland. My question is around, is there an intention or an application to put signage on 476 to divert other transient, incremental, transient or other traffic coming into our neighborhood? Or, is that something that's not on the table? Because I could see that as being,
It doesn't appear to be in this application.
could there be an agreement not to do that?
We've been talking about that with some of the other things going on in the township, about how that exact concern, not wanting to invite people off of this interstate into our area, because they don't do that right now. There are no signs until you get to Plymouth meeting area. So that's been a concern with a lot of the development that's going on. I don't know if it's necessarily on the table for this particular one, but I agree with exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, I'd suggest it might be a good idea to, provide that one, something that will not happen.
I think we could want that, but I'm not sure that the Blue Route is subject to our desire. If they wanted to sell advertising, they might.
They can agree not to do it.
Well, they can agree not to advertise. That's true.
Good evening. Jason Mangler. I'm a resident of South Wayne as well. To second on the previous comments, I travel for my job quite often. And when I'm traveling looking to get gas or looking to get lunch, the last time I checked, lunch is a pretty big destination for Wawa, right? They're not driving people there for breakfast. It's subs, it's hoagies, right? So, number one, I'm looking for signs when I'm driving. So if I'm looking for somewhere to get gas and I'm not from the area, I'm going to find somewhere where I can go. So I think that's an excellent suggestion that we have that into the application. Second of all, I think we'd be fooling ourselves not to think that there's not going to be a lunchtime rush. And so for the board to put that consideration into a traffic study, I think would be short-sighted. Thanks.
Also, I don't know if anybody else, but I know my destination on my truck is if I'm on 76 or if I'm on the Turnpike and I come up on an exit, it pops up on my thing that there's a gas station or there's a Wawa or there's a motel or a hotel. And I don't think people are paying for that. I think that's just something that pops up on my, not necessarily Waze, but on my truck. If I'm on the highway, it just pops up. At this exit, there's, this gas and that gas and this hotel or so forth.
Might be your nav system.
Yeah, it's in the nabs, yes.
Hello, my name is Diane Engelbert, and I live on North Aberdeen Avenue. And That seems to be the forgotten Aberdeen, but we are there. I'm not sure what community conversations Mr. Cornelia is referring to, but the taped last two meetings that I looked at didn't have much presence in terms of the residents, so I am really happy to see all of these people here tonight. I don't know if they got letters or mailings, but I know none of us on North Aberdeen got any kinds of notices about meetings concerning Wawa. On North Aberdeen, which is a very small one-way street, there's already very high traffic with high-speed drivers, wrong-way vehicles. We have pictures and videos of 18-wheeler semis going down the wrong way, and numerous impatient or rude car drivers. Wrong-way traffic will likely increase as traffic gets jammed at the intersection coming from South Aberdeen and then chooses to go straight across to North Aberdeen because they can't make their desired turns quickly enough. Watching the past recorded meetings, I've heard no comments about the impact on North Aberdeen. Tonight was the first night I even heard North mentioned. Although it would be easier to ignore a high-density neighborhood like ours, Twins, Rose Homes, that doesn't have the high real estate values found elsewhere in the township. Please remember that North Aberdeen will be impacted, and and alternatives to provide relief should be considered. 24-hour noise and high-speed vehicles will increase. Contractor trucks, now headed to the local hardware store from 7:30 to 7, will likely be looking for their Wawa breakfast well before that. Cars sometimes travel up our small street at 40 to 50 miles per hour, driving past the 15-mile-per-hour sign. For kids biking, running, or scootering down our street the wrong way towards Cohenfield Park, more traffic creates higher odds of a bad incident where Radnor Street Road curves around to North Aberdeen. In closing, I'm casting my no vote against the Wawa project, but you're probably not keeping a tally of negative opinions. With transparency in mind, I wonder if there ever would be a defined tally count that would be enough to deny the project. It would be interesting to know what it would take for the township to turn down the Wawa project with its potential revenue from taxes and instead move in favor of quality of life and safety of local residents and school children. Thank you.
Do we have a public comment or yes?
Skip, I think maybe you should clarify a little bit our role and the
I will.
process.
I will.
That would be great.
Okay.
Paul Pro, Ward 1, 60-year resident. Could anyone tell me how many students attend St. Catherine's and the middle school? So what's the total of the two schools? 1,300 students are going to be in that vicinity, so the traffic is a major issue. Thank you.
No, Regina just asked me to give you a perspective, and Sue Stern started to actually allude to it. This is not a new use as far as the zoning hearing board, which maybe some of you went to that meeting. This is a continuation of a use, and because of that, it's much closer to a by right use, and we can't take into account the extraneous other factors that you could in a special exception in the same way. Our hands are somewhat tied, is what I'm trying to say to you. That being said, this is still a time to negotiate things that can make it more tolerable, but probably not prevent it.
And the other thing is, we're an advisory board. We're not like the zoning board that is semi-quasi-legal. We can only advise the zoning board and or the commissioners as to what we think should be done. So just so you kind of have an idea of what we do.
And we weren't asked about this by zoning.
And the ultimate decision, obviously, is with the Board of Commissioners. And so we're really here to make suggestions and recommendations to improve the plan, we're really not in a position to reject it because we don't think it's a good idea. You can reject it based on it being non-compliant with our township ordinances.
And to just throw one more log on the fire, we also don't have to immediately approve it if we have concerns that meetings haven't been held in an appropriate venue and to an appropriate extent. And that maybe it would be, this is an appropriate time, too many times appropriate, but to look at the 24-hour piece too.
My name is John Nelson. I'm a 30-plus year resident in St. David's Road. I had the misfortune of my commuting over the years to have to buy gas at 6:15 in the morning to 6:30 in the morning, 3 days a week at what originally was the Exxon and now the Sunoco station on the corner there. Usually at those times in the morning, the lights were just barely coming on because they weren't operating 24 hours a day. The BP was almost dark half the time I went by. So the concern I have is, you know, if the difference when those stations were closing about around midnight, it was dark for the neighborhood until 6 o'clock in the morning. There was no traffic in and out of those gas stations during those hours. I just can't imagine the impact here would not be tremendous. Right now, we have traffic that's increased substantially through that whole area, and we have St. David's Road is now one of the favorite cut-throughs because the traffic can turn off of Lancaster and get all the way through the middle school, cut over to Conestoga, or bypass Wayne entirely. This is going to drive traffic, more traffic onto that road and onto Midland. And I think this is an area that hasn't been studied enough by the township to think of the broader area, not just Midland, but the whole broader area there, to look at the traffic patterns and get their own estimate of what the impact's going to be to the community. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Patty Bauer. I live in the 300 block of Midland, so I'm going to be impacted. I back to residential. My main concern is safety. I do have 2 kids that walk pretty much everywhere they go, which is why we bought that house. Had I known that the traffic in front of my house would impede me from getting out of my driveway during St. Catherine's come and go, I may have rethought my purchase. Now to think that on the other side of me, I'm going to be feeling locked in or unsafe is a little bit overwhelming. We do have about 900 kids at the middle school who put their hoods on and put their heads down and look at their phone and talk to their friends. And I know that that is, nobody can control that, but it really scares me. I know that they understand how to walk in Wayne, and if you live in Wayne, you know how to navigate the kids. It's the people that are not used to being there that really don't understand how our kids are and what they do. And now that really everything has moved down to the Five Below, the So Fun, that area has more kids than it ever has had. Those 2 stores have moved Wayne from Wayne down to now where Aberdeen is. So that is my number one concern. I hope it's whether that plan involves the flip would do the kids and the parents a huge service. Flipping what they want to get to, which is the candy and Wawa, to where they're going in, which is Aberdeen, would solve a lot of the safety problems, in my opinion. For them not to have to deal with the gas would go a long way for people with kids. Secondly, based on just looking at the pictures of what it would look like, particularly from the road, I would ask that anybody who is allowed to have an opinion hold them up to the same standards that I have to with my historic home. My shed couldn't be the shed that I wanted because it needs to look a certain way to match what my house looks like, what my neighbors' houses look like. And I can't cut down certain trees because they're too old or, the township doesn't let me do things. I'm going to ask that standard be across the board, because the pictures that were shown don't line up with what I would have to do.
One thing we have in Radnor is a design review board. They will have to go in front of the design review board, be there.
I will.
That's all I can tell
was
you.
at the last month's,
Like I said, that's not, we don't necessarily do that, but we do have a board that does do that.
Okay.
And they're fairly stringent as to the rules, as you know.
I do know. I
Okay.
know that well. And then I guess lastly, the water, I see all of these large percentages, which I'm very happy about. We were underwater, 100%. Could not see yards. Up to my thighs in water crossing the road to get to my neighbor who has a dog who wasn't home, whose home was, you know, her fence was floating away. I understand that they're within what they're allowed to do, but we have a major water problem. So I'm hoping that they don't add to the problem, that they can simply maintain the current problem.
I think they're going to improve on that problem.
Okay.
Any
They don't-
new construction in Radnor really has to adhere to the stormwater management systems that they have. So I think if it does have one bright spot to it, is that they will in fact have a system that will take care of a lot of the stormwater that currently isn't being taken care of.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Paul Hayes, 214 Midland. I just wanted to point out a couple of things. I agree with all the things that have been presented, but there is no discount gas station from Rosemont to Devon. I'm a survivor of the presentations when the Blue Route went in, and I was told, I asked the question after things were approved, well, how much traffic do you think we'll get in the first year? Well, it would be about 10% increase. So that's where I'm coming from. But we all know, I think we all know that the profit on gasoline is relatively small. But it has a sweetness to it, in the fact that, hey, I can go there, I can get some cents off every gallon, and you know what? I'll go in and buy a cup of coffee. It's really why the station, why Wawa is so profitable, is because they're selling high profit stuff inside the store. The gasoline station, the gasoline pumps are just really the sweetness to bring their customers on in. Capitalism, it's great, it's fine. But the capitalism, if you just on that corner, does not work in the design that it is right now, or what is proposed. The other thing is that if you want to see a good example of what happens when cars are going west, and they're trying to turn east into a facility, as in what is it? The real estate place right beyond the turn into Giant and Remax. I'm sorry, but you see very, very few cars go in there. But when a car tries to turn going west, turning into that facility, you'll see cars backing up immediately, and that was presented also. So it's really, really a very, very, very difficult thing with this traffic. This is a big snake of traffic that is coming down through Wayne, and there's nothing to stop it. It's the only thing that we do is just grease it as best as we can so that the traffic moves through and not disturbed, because it was also brought out that the people that are going west, if they can't get through, they're going to start going into the side streets. And Midland Avenue will take people all the way on down to the middle school. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kirk Rebane from South Wayne, 25-year resident. I already avoid that intersection like a plague. It's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. And to have this gentleman, who admittedly doesn't live here, who in a bit of a flippant way said it only increases by 24%, that traffic's all going to go back into Midland, St. David's. It just makes absolutely no sense that this could be allowed. It's just going to ruin the entire neighborhood. And then when you add on top of that, that we've got the gas station, the pumps next to the school, you've got that side of that building on Lancaster Pike, which is just the ugliest thing I've ever seen. This is sort of a joke. And then we're using studies, traffic studies from all Wawas. If there's Wawas in Lancaster, if that traffic's increasing 24%, who cares? This is an incredibly busy intersection. 24% is going to ruin this. It's not just 1,000 vehicles. It's 24%. It's going to be a nightmare.
In fairness to the applicant, it's not all the traffic is on Aberdeen. Some of the traffic is Lancaster coming in on the way to the city and going out again.
I avoid the intersection from all directions.
I avoid it too. And
It's
I
an
wish
absolute nightmare.
I wish I could avoid the Bloomingdale intersection, but I take my wife to the train twice a day, so that's my problem.
I'm sorry, can I just clarify one thing? I apologize. This is the second time I heard it, so I want to clarify. If I confused the residents by my discussion on traffic with respect to the amount of traffic that would be associated with Wawa, I apologize. I didn't propose that we would increase the traffic by 24%. No way, no shape, no form. The 24% number comes from the fact that the amount of traffic that will go in and out of the Wawa, 24% of that traffic is new to the roadway, which equates to about 100 trips in an hour. We're not proposing to increase. I don't believe I mentioned any word that I said tonight said insignificant, but
I couldn't even say that to the neighbors without being embarrassed.
just to clarify, 24%, we're not increasing the traffic by 24%. Thank you.
You're saying that trips to the facility will increase by 24% from a baseline possibility because of the pass-by traffic. In other words, the pass-by traffic is going to be there anyway, and they just happen now to go into Wawa. The other 24% is new destination traffic that goes out of their way to go to the Wawa and wouldn't necessarily drive on Aberdeen or Lancaster, but they do because they want to go to the Wawa. Yes or no?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Essentially.
My name's Bill Hain. I'm at 324 Midland. I get the traffic that goes by my house now. I'm thinking of the traffic that's going to go when the trucks decide that the easiest way to get into the facility is to come down either St. David's or Pembroke, then rumble in front of my house, and then rumble in through that extra long driveway that they have off of Aberdeen. And that's going to be the Wawa trucks. That's also in my nightmare. It's going to be the car carriers that come off the Blue Route and head for Devon, where all the car dealerships are. That's the kind of thing we're talking about in a street that was built 300 years ago, 200 years ago. My house is, 130 years old. I can't tear my house down. I'm not allowed to. The township won't let me. It's against the law. But they can take a property that is not open 24 hours a day, that does not have the same traffic volume, that is going to have a much increased traffic volume. And they're allowed to do that, you say, almost as a right. I don't know where that right came from. I understand that this is not a zoning issue because the zoning board kicked it over to you folks.
Well, they made a decision that makes it harder for us to just say, we don't like this.
I understand that. But I was at one of the meeting Mr. Knigler mentioned. I didn't think of it as a meeting with the neighbors because it was basically set up like this. They came in, they gave their speech. Interestingly, the spiel that they gave at that point, and I don't mean spiel's a bad choice of words, the presentation they gave was all about how this is a much less significant use of this property than it would be, than it is now, because you have 6 driveways now, and we're only going to have 3 or 4. You have a convenience store. They told me there was a convenience store in the where the BP is. There's no convenience store there.
Sunoco.
I think Mr. Keneally misspoke and said there was a body shop at the Sunoco station. There's a small little car repair area. Well, I understand, but you said a body shop. And so what I'm hearing is that because this property is basically the same use it has now, because they're going to sell gas there, then the rest of this stuff, all of this is basically at the edges. At the edges. That's it.
I would say that after some more time has passed, that there'll be things that will change here. I can't guarantee it, but I would say that meetings with the neighbors, meeting with staff, may be able to massage the project. I can't tell you that there won't be a Wawa there.
Oh, I know you can't tell me that. I wouldn't expect you to tell me that.
Well, I don't, and we're an advisory board, so we could just say, like I hated the Villanova project with 35 feet off the street, but the commissioners voted for it. So maybe this particular time they'll impose conditions that are even stronger than we can do under the Saldo.
Okay, but I just wanted to say that to the extent that this is treated as no change in the use of that property, that's nonsense.
Cheryl, are you in line? Okay.
My name is Cheryl Tamola, and I live 411 Midland Avenue. There's so many things wrong about this. First, I'd like to say that, is there no redress with the bad decision of the zoning hearing board?
Imagine the township could appeal it.
The zoning board never made a ruling on this.
Oh,
All right. Yeah, this wasn't a zoning hearing board issue. This is a permitted use. The zoning officer said it was a permitted use. I just want to clarify that.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Okay, but it's still, the zoning officer has made a determination that it's a permitted use.
So we have no
No, I don't know. That Charlie was actually on zoning.
The planning commission's, I'm sorry, may I? The planning commission's function here is to get comments from their engineers and their staff and try and determine if the application complies with the zoning ordinance and the subdivision and land development ordinance. And if it does, the law doesn't provide a lot of discretion for them to say no. Their job is to call balls and strikes. Does it meet this requirement? Does it meet that requirement? So there is...
I was on the planning commission for
Okay,
years.
then you understand what they're
Right.
trying to do. So
But I felt this was an opportunity to ask, to find out. I felt this was an opportunity to ask them if there is any redress. I don't know who else to ask about it, and this seemed like a good idea, to find out whether there is any redress for those of us who are suffering at the hands of a bad decision, as far as I see it. So that's why I'm asking this. I know that they're not going to be able to say, you're out, or you're in, or you're safe, but I'm asking this as just a point of information, and I hope I'm allowed to do that. Thank you. Okay. Okay, all right.
I would think, just to kind of let you know how it works, and I'm sure you do, but maybe some people don't. We have a zoning officer in the township. That's Mr. Kachansky. Okay. He makes a determination when someone presents something that they want to do in the township. He makes a determination whether that is legal under the zoning ordinance we have in this township. Okay? If it is, he passes it on. All right? If it isn't, then the applicant who wants to do something goes in front of the zoning board, right, and either asks for a variance or a special exception to one or many different things that they need to work on, okay? The zoning board passes judgment on that. If the applicant doesn't like it, they have a right to appeal it to the Court of Common Pleas in Delaware County. Now, whether You can do that. I don't know. You'd have to get a lawyer to ask you that. Nick could probably tell you that. But that's kind of the way it works. You know, it's not, we don't determine whether it's legal or not legal, whether it conforms or it doesn't conform, okay? That's not our job, okay?
I know that.
The zoning officer decides it. If it doesn't, the applicant has an opportunity to appeal to the zoning board. The zoning board makes a determination and passes judgment. And since the zoning board is quasi-legal, okay, their determination is binding. They can appeal it. The township can appeal it, or the applicant can appeal it to the Court of Common Pleas in Delaware County.
But the community can't appeal it?
Well, that you have to ask a lawyer. Kevin,
Okay,
can they appeal it? I would have to think they would have the opportunity to appeal a decision from,
You'd have to be able to show that you were aggrieved by the decision, that your property was located close enough that you would be adversely affected. But then, yes, if you can show that, you can appeal.
That's all of us, right. Okay, that ain't right. Absent that, I thought I'd try to clear that up first. Apparently, I've muddied it, but be that as it may. This plan is too much. I think we all recognize that. It's when, I know they have their right to develop this way, but what we're not doing, this focusing on how many curb cuts there are, it's been a major point. I mean, I met Nikki in the post office, and he brought up the curb cuts, so whatever. But I think the scale of what's happening here is out of control. There may have been 2 other businesses there, but they were short and small. And this, by these elevations that you've shown, are gigantic. And we're showing Lancaster Avenue was our main street, and we are showing the back end of this into the main street. What kind of message does that, and introducing a whole other dynamic with Lancaster Avenue. Lancaster Avenue, we're supposed to be treating it like it's something, according to the comp plan, that we're proud of, and this is our front door. And this plan is just flies in the face of what Wayne is supposed to be. And I know you can't, I mean, I think that, I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir for some of you, but at any rate, this is just a bad plan. I can't say it any other way. Even if shifting it would be an improvement. I know they're not going to shift it because I'm pretty sure the tanks are underneath where they're putting the tanks again. So the idea of switching where the tanks are would be difficult. But I just think this is a really bad plan, and if you're really a planning commission, you'll advise the Board of Commissioners to deny it. Thank you.
let me kind of go over a couple things here. You have to understand, they have a legal right to put this there. Okay, I mean, they're legally permitted to put this there, or they're legally permitted to put something there. Okay, so what in my estimation, everyone in this room should be doing is first thing tomorrow morning, get on the phone and call Nick at his office and try and get to some kind of a compromise, okay? Some kind of a compromise that will help minimize the impact to the neighborhood, okay? Because that's your best you can't stop them. So you better get something that's palatable. Is it going to be 100% palatable? No. It might be only 80 or 60 or 50 or whatever it is, but every pound of flesh you get is kind of cutting into them too. So they're going to have to compromise with you. Can you hold it up and make it difficult for them? Probably. But I kind of think if Wawa set their mind that they want to put it there, they're going to put it there. Okay, so your best bet is get what you think is the best. If you don't like the way it looks, make them change it. If you want it flipped, make them flip it. The fact that where the tanks are, it doesn't make any difference. They're going to dig up the old tanks. They'll put the new tanks anywhere they want. It's not a problem, okay? But get together and figure what you want, and then make a plan and go talk to them, okay? And have a plan. Say, hey, this is what we would like. It happens all the time, right? And that's kind of what you guys should be doing. I think that's just my humble opinion.
I also.
This is your opportunity in the next month or 2 or 3 to get something along those lines.
Right.
If you just say no, that's
I know
not going to be productive.
It's all
But you
about
know.
massaging the plan, right? But I do want to say that all of us consider ourselves the guardians of a really beautiful community. And this is an incredible affront to it. And the fact that Wawa, that touts itself as, you know, your neighborhood wonderful place, has just done us an incredible disservice. And it's an embarrassment to them.
Cheryl, just in passing though, progress is possible here.
Oh, yes, I know.
Look at the first canopy and then look at the canopy today. I mean, even in those two, there's progress.
Right, exactly. So there's more to be done, I know. But I'm just making my point about our community. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Cheryl.
Hi, I'm Sandy Desai. I live at 209 Midland Avenue. So let's assume that I do not care about the increased pollution in our area with the 4,000 cars a day. Let's assume that I don't care about the decrease in my home value. Let's assume that I don't care about the traffic on my street or traffic on Lancaster. Let's assume I don't care that I went through serious changes to my home, like Patty Bauer, in my zoning and historic meetings to my home at 209 Midland. Let's assume that I don't care about the fact that I live in Radnor Township because there is something special about living in Wayne. And let's assume that I don't care that every Friday I take extreme care due to the Radnor Middle School's South Wayne Fridays to drive around everywhere. I need you to know that children are going to die, and I speak as a pediatrician today in front of you. Children will die, people will die as a result of this. And I strongly urge you and beseech you to please do your absolute best to prevent this schematic and consider whether you can live with that statement.
Ron Desai. I'm married to the woman who just spoke. There was a number of things that a number of folks said that I agree with, but I wanted to say one thing. Mr. Falcone, just there's a lot that neighbors can say and there's a lot that neighbors can do, but I find that you guys are an advisory board, and you are in a position of knowledge, and you are in a position of well connectivity. For me to go and call Nick's office, I think is. I don't know the right words to say, but I feel as though it's not accomplishing anything. I'm not sure whether Nick even wants to receive my phone call, even though I used Nick before very successfully, so thank you, Nick. But
you have to understand, you're wrong. You got to remember, we're an advisory board. We take advice from them and from you.
Yeah.
So if you come in front of us, because they'll be back in front of us, okay, and Nick will get up and say, we met with the township people, the residents of the township, and here's the solution we have. And we'll say, okay, you made a solution. Are you people okay with it? Yes. Are we 100% okay? No, but are you okay with it? Yes. That's what we do. So if you don't say anything and you don't have any resolutions or suggestions to bring in front of us, then we got to take.
Well, that's what today's about. That's why you have the largest meeting we've ever had about this, because there's been notices.
But
we've understood the severity of.
You're in 100 different directions. You don't have a plan that the group says these are the things that we have to have. Okay, these are the things that we can live with. Flipping the building, doing this, doing that, do A, B, C, and D. You don't have that now. You're all. Excuse me, sir. Can I finish? Can I finish? Thank you. That's what you need to do. That's why you have the meeting, so that you're coordinated and you have a coordinated spokesman who's going to talk about exactly what you all want, and meet with them and tell them. You know, nobody's done that. You know, everybody's talked about 100 different things.
I think what has to be clarified.
We don't get paid. I'm sorry. You know, we're all volunteers up here.
I think what has to be clarified is that we can only make recommendations to the Board of Commissioners.
Can you recommend
no? And if we recommend no, and they go ahead and say yes, and there's no improvement to the plans, it hurts everyone in this room.
We can't shout out. Okay, we can shout out, but we're not going to shout out.
So what we do and what we have done in the past is we work with the residents to get their concerns incorporated to the most degree possible and improve plans to the point that hopefully it looks a lot better than it does
Right,
today.
and so that's-
and this is part of the process. What's being, we're listening to it's not happening tonight. Don't think that your comments aren't being heard just because they're not cohesive and from one point of contact. We're listening to everything everyone's saying.
Yeah, I think where the process is disjointed, though, is what we're talking about right now, which is you're hearing the neighbors who have not had an opportunity, despite what I've heard. This is the first. We've lived here for 7 years now. This is the first, and we've made a big thing about this. In fact, on Halloween evening itself, one of the neighbors was passing out pamphlets because this was, reminders, come to this meeting, because it was a big deal. We weren't getting, notifications certainly from the Wawa group, from the applicants that, hey, we want to hear your concerns. We know this is important to you. We know you're a tight-knit community. This is the first time that has happened. And so what I'm hearing that I say is disjointed is that, well, we're the community here together, and you want to hear what it is that we're trying to say as neighbors. But on the other hand, you want us as neighbors to get together and somehow arm ourselves and develop a plan together and go
I think you're
outside of what's happening here.
misinterpreting. I think what we're asking is the applicant to reach out to the neighbors and set up a meeting.
Okay,
That's what we're asking.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
And
but I
that's what
also-
we generally ask. In a situation that impacts residents in a big way like this, we ask the developer to incorporate the comments of the neighbors by meeting with them outside before they come in here. Like, we're not happy that you
Right.
didn't meet with them either. You're not happy, we're not happy.
Well, then why can't you say, I think we should table
We're an
everything,
advisory
right?
committee.
Why don't we stop?
There's a process that we have to follow. There are timelines that we are held to, and we're working within our capabilities.
It is extremely likely that we are not doing anything but tabling this tonight.
So are you able to say no? Are you able to advise the commissioners as a no?
I think that we are not able to just say, well, we're able to say no.
No with cause.
But I don't think that we have cause yet. I think that this has to be, look, you have to picture a member of the township staff gave the initial opinion that this is not a new use. So the township has to revisit that decision process, maybe not. Maybe that is the best decision. In terms of a possibility for things to be better for the residents, it's a process. It's been the same process dozens of times. They should meet with you. There's too many people that are upset about this. There probably should be more than one, maybe more than two or even three meetings. There will be some discussion. I can't tell you, I think that they try to be decent citizens because they don't want to have a situation where everybody boycotts them or something because they screwed up their neighborhood, if you know what I mean. There'll be some compromise, I anticipate. I can't orchestrate it. You and the applicant have to work together, and literally, I've seen meetings where at the next meeting or the meeting after that, people come in and say, we don't love the plan, but because they're not going to be open more than 18 hours a day, we decided that as a group, the majority of us felt that this was appropriate.
We can't make the applicant meet with us, but maybe you can, and maybe that's the next step, and
The
this
way
continues to be
that
tabled
we
until-
may be, quote, making them is not making them, but if we table it, they didn't get the answer. Time is money. I mean, Nick doesn't work for free. He's going to have to come back again, et cetera. All these experts, it probably costs them several $1,000s an hour to be here, and we just told them, in effect, and I haven't polled everyone, but you're going to have to come back.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could clarify a thing, because I've heard it a couple times tonight, I never said that this was the same use. The current uses that are there right now under the zoning code are classified as motor vehicle service stations. The Wawa and its proposal is considered a retail use by the zoning code. A retail use is a use that is permitted by right in the C2 zoning district.
And just, Skip, if the board does decide to table this, we will give an additional 30-day extension.
Well, you
for
already,
action.
you gave that at the September meeting.
I did. We will give it an additional 30 days.
Okay. I'm not, the process should trust the process. The process should go on with the meeting with the neighbors. I think
Absolutely,
that's
I totally agree. I totally agree, and I'll turn to Steve at some point. Probably the best place to meet would be in here, Steve. And I would ask
We
for
would
him to
gladly
get some dates
facilitate
together.
that for neighbors. That's not a problem. I know it's going to be hard to reach. I mean, they're not a group like we are, so we being staff, so we can set something up where the neighborhood more or less, facilitates using this room and let the residents have access to the applicant, let that be heard, and we would step back. It would really just be your meeting. We would just have it set up and give you a room, and we can provide advice or not, however they wish to proceed.
And I really did, I thought that's what we were doing the other 2 times. I apologize to the neighbors if that was not, if those meetings were not relayed to you.
Just a point of clarification, and you can kind of check with any of the staff. 2 mailings went out on September 15th and October 19th to the neighbors.
I think the important thing is we're here where we are right now, and let's move in a positive forward direction.
I think what we should do is table this till maybe Salposio Jam.
I don't want to cut anyone's opportunity.
Coley Bookbinder, 213 Midland Avenue. But I think if we had a group, a 30-day window, let everybody come back, that would be more than, you'd fill this room 10 times. Nobody wants it. So, let me finish. May I?
Go ahead.
Nobody wants it in the first place. So we're willing to work with them rather than have it shoved down our face. Thank you.
Hi, I know I already had my turn, but I have to ask this because I really am dying to understand. If there was a meeting, I think, in the middle of August, maybe, I don't know when the first meeting was because I didn't even know about it, or anyway, my question is, if we had all been informed before that first meeting, when it was still in front of the commissioners, and this turnout had been like this or more, would it have gotten past the commission? Would they have approved it, or could they maybe have said no, and we would not have been in this situation?
I don't know that we could say no.
Even if you had lots of opposition to it.
I don't think, you
No,
have to understand, we
it's a
don't
by
have
right
the
use.
ability.
I'm not talking about you all, I'm talking about the first meeting
But
in
they
the summertime.
didn't approve, the Board of Commissioners
Excuse me,
had
I
not
can
waived.
clarify on that. So Commissioner Clark of your ward convened a subcommittee, community development subcommittee meeting specifically for Wawa. They were informational meetings only. There was no decisions made at those meetings. There was nothing passed, approved, or denied. It was a chance for the applicant to present to the subcommittee of the Board of Commissioners and the public who attended the project. And then there was another one as the plans evolved somewhat. No more, no less. So really, this is the first official meeting for this project.
Well, the hard part to understand is why an advisory committee that they have no power per se of stopping it. Now, all of a sudden, it's up to us. I just am confused as to where the no is. Where can the no be?
You have to understand, it was deemed to be by right. It had been deemed to be by right project on this site. So there is no reason to say no. It would come straight to us because they could go to court and say the zoning ordinance says A, B, and C, and we're doing A, B, and C, and the court would say, okay, you have it. So you gotta understand we can only work within the parameters of the zoning ordinance. That's all we can do, okay? And the zoning officer made a determination by his vast experience with the zoning code in Radnor Township, as well as other zoning codes, that these people had a right to put that property there. And as long as they conformed to all the rules and regulations within that zoning, okay, they can do it.
Well, that first meeting, Sue Stern had the brilliance, I thought, to say that that little thing in the BP station is not a retail store, and yet somehow the zoning must have decided, oh, yes, it is.
Well,
that would have been
the thing,
not
and
right.
I respect Susan very much. I mean, she's been on this board. But it's, you'll probably find 10 people who would disagree with me and with her and with other people. But we've hired an expert Township hired an expert to make that determination. He's made that determination. Sometimes he says yes and sometimes he says no. But you can bet that whatever he says, there's going to be somebody who's going to say he's wrong. Okay? He made the determination. Okay? Now it's in front of us to look at things and advise what we think. But as long as the determination of the zoning officer, all right, and the zoning board, if it went that far, is that they can do it, I don't think we can.
We
say
don't have
no.
the opportunity to disagree
Right.
with.
We don't have that opportunity.
If the determination's been made, whether we agree or not, and assuming we all agree or don't agree, has nothing to do with it. We have to play our role within our process. We're not here to debate whether or not it's an allowable use.
Well, I think
it's
you
already
have to-
it's been determined that it's an allowable use. There's a plan in front of us that we have to weigh in on. There are a few waivers that they're asking for. Very few.
I guess-
And if we were to say, you know what, I'm so sick of looking at this plan, it's so objectionable, I'm just going to recommend no. And then it goes exactly how it is in front of the Board of Commissioners, and say they even say no. And these guys take to the township to court, then guess what they're building? That plan right in front of you. And that's not to anyone's benefit, not to their benefit and not to yours. That's what we're trying to avoid here. Improve the plan to the point where no one's happy.
Well,
Because when
yeah.
no one's happy, it's a compromise.
I think you're saying a determination that's allowable. It's unfortunate that it's not acceptable.
But you got to understand.
We have to
that-
work within the process, and it is difficult, and I understand your frustration.
Yeah. Okay.
And
And
you know,
I
again,
agree.
you can't. It's as Regina just said. We can't say no. We don't have that right, and that's why when I said before, your best opportunity is to get together and decide what you think is palatable. Okay, the minimum or the maximum, whatever you want to do.
Well, that's what's
ask
frustrating.
for
None of
5
it's
buckets.
palatable.
Yeah, well, but you got to understand, they're going to do something there. You cannot stop them from doing something. If they go to court, okay, they're going to get everything you don't like. So your best bet is try and get something. Okay, you have to try and get something, and more than likely, they'll agree to some of your demands. Okay, but if you go in and you say, and you put your feet in the cement and you say no, 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 and you go in front of the commissioners and say, line up and scream and yell at them, they'll say no, and like Regina said, they'll go to court of common pleas and they'll get everything because they have a right for it. I don't, huh? But
Unfortunately, once they file that and it's under current regulations, there's nothing that can be done. If we want new regulations, we have to work with our Board of Commissioners to strengthen up our codes. And I wouldn't be opposed to that.
Kirk Rebane, I guess I'm a little confused on what your role is. You told us to go meet with or call Nick, and you're all saying meet with them. Aren't you our representative? So shouldn't we give you?
That's part of what's
our
happening
plan?
today. We want to hear that.
You go with them? I mean,
Mr.
why are we
Chairman.
sitting
Because
down
I
and
can't-
how do we
I don't
we
know.
Tell them that they're gonna.
Yeah, but we don't know how many of you, and I don't want to do like 10 straw polls. We don't know how many of you don't want a left turn lane on Aberdeen. We don't know how many of you want
Why
a
aren't we
canopy
gonna have
that's
subcommittee meetings with you as opposed to them?
Because
and if they
you-
say they're
you're
going to
having-
agree with us on something,
this
how do
is-
we know it's going to be followed through?
But that's the plan. The plan is
You do
exactly
both.
what you just said. You're going to meet with them. You're going to come in front of them and say, we met with Nick and Wawa, okay? And in those meetings, this is what we decided that is palatable to us. And our recommendation to the Board of Commissioners is, this is what we think you should request these people do, which is what we're asking you. What
thank
do you?
That clarifies. Thank you.
That's what I was trying to tell you is you got to kind of get cohesive and say, this is what we want, all right? Now, you may not get everything you want, so you got to kind of prioritize what you think is really, really important. And, you ask for a little bit more all the time.
But I'm still a little confused why we have to meet with them at all. Why can't we meet amongst ourselves and then come to you?
Because
Say,
you
this is what
kind of
we
want to.
The problem is we can't offer you the concessions they can.
Right.
We don't have any power, just to say it. We have no power in this process.
Right.
We're
And the only reason
facilitators.
why we want you to meet with them is that you kind of narrow it down to a bunch of things that you're both willing to accept. And it's easier that way. Instead of you saying, well, we don't want a right-hand lane, and then someone said, well, we want a left-hand lane, you kind of get with them and say, okay, we want the right-hand lane, but you can have this. We want that, you get this. And then once you have that plan, and once you have that list, then we can move forward. And this
Thank
isn't
you.
something that's going to happen next month or maybe 2 months. Okay, it's an evolving situation.
Joel Allison at 421 Midland. I think we have a clearer picture of what you all do and what we need to do. And I really appreciate that. And Steve's point, on the 2 meetings, they were presentations. There were a few residents that expressed themselves. The first meeting, I think there were 6 people.
First one was a lot of people.
Second?
Yeah.
Okay.
First there was a lot.
So, as a 30-year resident, it seems to me maybe we should organize, put together a petition, put together a plan, and come back and if it's with Nick or Wawa and say, we realize what's going on legally, okay? We also love our community. I don't want another Ardmore, and that's what we're talking about. I have a house we spent 30 years restoring, and God, guys, I love your coffee, but I'll be damned if I want to look at the facility.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, at the conclusion of public comment, can I have 2 minutes of
Yes.
the Planning Commission's time? Thank you.
I would like to wrap up public comment. I think we have a very clear idea that, except for maybe one person who's afraid to speak, so to speak, that everybody's opposed to this project in some way. I think that what I saw in the audience is the beginning of a rational plan, which was circulating a list of who attended and how to reach each other. So go to.
Well, I think I would like to hear everyone who wants to speak, though. I really don't want anyone to hold back if they have a comment that they'd
No,
like to
I'm
share
not
with us.
saying we can't. I'm just
Because
saying I'd like to
I would
get to
rather
the
not
end.
delay any input if you have some to provide tonight.
Okay.
Hi, thank you for what you're doing. I appreciate that you're volunteers. I'm Catherine Twitmeyer, Upland Way. Just a point of clarification. So you're an advisory board. So is it worthwhile if tonight we give you specific areas where you should advise that perhaps they should be looking at further? Is that helpful?
I think they're listening to you as well as we are.
Okay, so among many issues that we've already heard tonight, that intersection is a problem. The north side is a very bad problem because I think there are probably 8 driveways that come on to North Aberdeen in a very short footage, 100 feet maybe. So the north side is a problem, and as a result, it's already creating a problem on the south side. And that is with low volume traffic coming here into the Sunoco station. So now that we have Wawa coming in with high volume, you're going to have conflicts all over the place, even with only one entrance and exit. And the idea of making a no left on there, I don't think is a great idea, because then you're just going to put everything coming into that intersection. I agree that the right turn lane does nothing for you. I think it needs to be more of a left turn lane, because that would help offset the problem from the north side. So I guess my advice would be, can we go back and do a very specific study of this intersection with all of the competing driveways, entrances, exits, so that we really understand what we're dealing with there, because that's a very significant problem.
It's a little scary, but I looked at the traffic study today. It's 553 pages.
For that one intersection?
No, they studied that intersection. They studied it the year 2020, the year 2025. They studied 3 or 4 other intersections. There are page after page of data. And that's why we have Amy, because Amy knows which pages are of critical importance, and I don't. So I don't think you could, if I handed you this traffic study, it would not help.
It's at his feet if you want to look at it.
That we as the citizens here tonight can
It's
help
there.
you,
Yeah.
help us right now.
I think we're trying to do that. Well, I
more specific?
think that we are probably going to table it so that you can have grassroots activity with the applicant.
But what I'm hearing from you is the
don't-
intersection and the conflicts with the traffic is your
Yes,
priority.
and I think, I don't think they're appreciating the stacking that's going to happen going into that light.
So
'Cause
you're
it's already
concerned
bad
that,
now.
that people won't even be able to get through the light and it's going to take multiple
No, they're
lights?
not even going to be able to get onto Aberdeen just from Wawa, let alone people just trying to use the road to get to Lancaster Avenue. So there's going to be a multiplier effect there with a high volume outlet like Wawa there. So I know you've already heard it, but wanted to reiterate. Thank you.
Terrence Ryan, I live at 211 Midland. Just a quick question. So if it gets tabled this evening, how long until it comes back up?
That partially depends on you and the applicant.
Okay, so there's not a 30 or...
Well, there is. There is. I think they're entitled to be on again in December.
Oh,
But,
so it's
but
set-
pragmatically,
Okay.
well, there's a finite timeline for applications. You either have to,
Until it has to get resubmitted.
well, no, you say yes, no, or, and if you keep tabling, they'll just go right to the commissioners. That's happened
Gotcha, okay.
to us as well.
So the December...
The commissioners are your ultimate
is, yeah.
decider.
Right.
Typically, you only table if you're making, if there's a
Chance,
reason,
yeah.
if there's progress to be
Right.
made. And
Okay.
if you're at a locked point, like if tonight you were all saying there will absolutely never be a Wawa at this location, and they're saying there absolutely will, tabling it wouldn't make sense.
Right.
But that's not what's happening, hopefully. And so when there's progress being made, if everyone agrees to something sooner rather than later, that's always ideal.
Okay.
So it seems you have a lot of clear concerns. The clarity isn't with the solutions. So start your list of your wish list really has to come forward in a way that they can hear what you're saying
Right.
and say whether or not they can incorporate those.
No, understood. So, but is it December then? Is that the next?
Would be typical.
That
Yeah,
would be
December
next meeting.
3rd is our next scheduled
Skip.
meeting.
Okay.
If I could, we received a 35-day extension from the applicant today because they had requested to not be here last month. Your next meeting is December 3rd, but January 7th of 2019 right now is the drop-dead date for the commissioners to make a decision unless we're granted additional extensions from Wawa.
I think I heard Nick say another 30, right?
Yeah, I heard Nick say that too. Well, I think that the
We'll see. There could be additional extensions.
Yeah, at a minimum, right? And if we're making progress and we're in the home stretch, there may be another 30
We
days.
understand. What
Okay.
we've said from
You
the
know
very
the
beginning,
process.
that this is a process.
Hi, I'm Charmaine McManus, and I'm at 301 Midland. And I swore after the first meeting I was never going to get back up here and speak, but I'm here. Partially, I think, because in looking this,
Try to keep the mic so that people can
Okay.
hear you if it's recorded.
There's a tree. And especially the neighbors probably know that our back driveway is right there. So I guess at this point, I'm a little concerned with how we're going to use that driveway with that big entrance, right turn, left turn, all of this. So I guess in looking at this, just don't forget that there's a driveway right there that, and as I said at the first meeting, I have teenage drivers. I have a son trying to get out of that driveway every day to go to school. It's scary now with St. Catherine's, my kids back into our driveways so they can get out. And I can't, and I guess at the first meeting, it didn't make sense to me, I guess, how many additional cars there's just going to be in that area. So I guess and I know you guys have really worked with the landscaping, and you have definitely reduced the number of pumps, and you've done something with the canopy. And I don't know if that curb cut can get moved up. I guess there's a reason it's so far back, but, you know, it's just a concern of mine. Thank you.
Holy Bookbinder, 213 Midland. I think one of the other ideas that we spoke of already was the hours, maybe a 6 to 11 p.m., as they did in the one in Florida off of I-95 by Orlando. They tabled it, and they came to a compromise of 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. I think that should be something we should be discussed as well. Hours of operation.
I think that we have discussed that. I mean, it's
But
out
right
there.
now,
It'll be in the YouTube video. You'll be able to see that this has come up. I've just said it myself.
Okay.
To another public
Yeah,
comment.
before they said was 24 hours. So.
No, I understand what they would like to do. And I'm not saying that they will agree or not, but I think those meetings that I hope you have right away will have that on the table.
Thanks.
Is there any additional public comment? Going once? Well, I appreciate everyone's tremendous interest in this. I understand it. You know, if this were my street, I'd feel I'd be in that audience. A million years ago, I first got involved in the township fighting Brook Farm, which dates me, I guess, as a longtime resident. But anyway, I'd like to give members of the commission an opportunity to say something, but I have in mind a motion.
Can I just ask one question? One thing that no one spoke about, what is the ownership of the Wawa store? Is it going to be a lease?
Yeah, it's a lease.
It's a lease. How
The
long?
owner- The Caracalians will still own the property.
Okay.
Yeah, I said that.
How long of a lease will it be, and as well as what's the ramifications with the other Wawa up in Bloomingdale and the one also right by Philippine Field?
My understanding, at least the one in Wayne, will stay open. I mean, that's what I've been told all along. And it is a lease. Peter just told me it'd probably be a 20-year lease. I'm sure there'll be renewal options in there.
What's the term on the lease on Bloomingdale? Do you know how much is left?
I know that's been extended recently.
Extended for 10, I don't know, 12. I don't know for sure. I don't want to speak out of term, but over 12 or 15 years.
He said
Actually,
like 12 or 15
the next
years.
time you guys come back, I would actually, if you guys could get that information, I think the township should know about that. Thanks.
I think if they keep it open, that would be to this advantage. Closing it, I think, would be a disadvantage.
Chairman,
No, yeah, that definitely bodes in their favor. I mean, because obviously it would take a little bit of the edge off.
Mr. Chairman, the solicitor, before maybe the board speaks, if the solicitor did want to speak to you both for
Right.
you all.
Before we make a motion?
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt Planning Commission comment, but some of the things that the residents raised tonight, and some of the things that the Planning Commission raised are common complaints with Wawas, and I put together a list of common conditions that Wawa has accepted other places, and it may be beneficial for you to hear those conditions, for the neighbors to hear them, so that it can be part of their ongoing dialogue when they meet with Wawa, and also the staff's dialogue and the Planning Commission's dialogue as you move forward. And to that effect, I just wrote a note because it was discussed, the unsightliness of the Wawa from Lancaster Avenue, I'm sorry to categorize it that way, is something that could be remedied by having a false front on the side of the Wawa. But other conditions which might help are having it In my experience, it's not very likely that you'll get them to curtail the hours from 24/7. However, you can get them to curtail delivery hours so that truck traffic is limited during the hours of, say, 10 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the morning. It's also important that any buffering or landscaping that they propose, there'd be escrows for it, and that they be required to maintain those bufferings in perpetuity so that if plants die 15 years from now, they're still replaced. The people living there will still have a problem. There was at least one Wawa project where the township required a baseline study of traffic in the surrounding neighborhoods so that after the occupancy permit was issued, if there were complaints that the traffic had increased dramatically, there'd be some kind of baseline to establish exactly how much of an increase the residents were experiencing, and that would help, presumably, in finding a resolution to that problem. Another thing that is commonly requested of Wawa is to reduce truck patronage to the site. You're going to have trucks that make deliveries to Wawa. You're going to have trucks that deliver gas. But if there are no parking areas and parking spaces large enough to accommodate tractor trailers, you can cut down greatly on the number of trucks that actually come to the site. Also, you want to make sure that there's a condition that no high-speed diesel fueling facilities be on site, so it cannot be a gas-up location. It is common when a Wawa is located near an interstate or a large highway to get them to agree that they will not advertise on those little blue signs along the interstate. That is not an uncommon condition, and it is one that they have agreed to. It is also a good idea to have Wawa meet with the police chief before occupancy of the building so that the police chief can inspect the site and make recommendations on how best to prevent loitering and other undesirable activity at the site. It is also a good idea to have cameras installed at the Wawa that link directly to the laptops of your police officers so that the activity at the site can be monitored on an almost continual basis. To protect the neighbors from unwanted sound, it's a good idea to limit any broadcast that can occur through the intercoms at the pumps, and that the intercoms at the pumps only be used for direct assistance to customers and not to broadcast music or Wawa advertisements. You'll probably want them, in addition to showing you the architecturals that they brought this evening, to address their sign package and to make sure that the base of those signs are consistent with the architecturals in the building facade. And then you also, there's a few other things, but that's the gist of the kind of things that other communities have done to try and ameliorate the negative impacts of this type of use.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Are you going to make that list part of the record and available then to the public?
I will.
Okay. And maybe if one of the neighbors thinks on this, you might want to get the contact information right now from our lawyer. Okay. Looking for any additional comments or a motion at this point.
At this point, I would move that we table this.
Do I have a second?
I second, but I would recommend highly that they meet with the neighbors before they come back in front of this board.
I think that's been made abundantly clear
Well,
that
it's never abundantly.
that everybody should be meeting with themselves, the neighbors that is, form a plan of action. There's been a lot of good things that have been said here today, this evening, ideas for you to consider. I can recommend Susan, who's probably not busy enough, as someone who can provide a lot of help and guidance in your deliberations. And I urge you to do that. And
If there's someone who wants to be included on your neighborhood mailing list, is there a point of contact we can provide them on this recording? Susan Stern, email address, please.
Stern, it's still the same, Stern Zoo.
Stern Zoo, Z-O-O, at Comcast. And the township can also provide that, because I don't want anyone to miss out on the meetings that will be upcoming. And please, make sure you include all your constituents.
If the neighbors want to meet first together, is there a facility here that we can use?
We can, township can facilitate that too. I'll grab you a card before you leave, and we can set that up for you. And then the other meeting. And just, so on the front page of the website, the homepage for Radnor Township, left-hand bar down bottom corner, it says Wawa. So everything we've received to date from the applicant, all our review letters, in a few days, the solicitors, conditions that she spoke of will also be posted. So that's one-stop shopping for anybody who wants to see what's been included, as well as what Mr. Kuhn had talked about, the traffic impact study. That's everything we have.
I think we still need to vote on the motion.
is there a second?
Charlie, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. I want to point out we have one more agenda item.
Thank you.
This,
I got a
Susan.
flight. I got a flight at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'm going to keep right on top of that.
I want to keep trucking along too. There's Dave.
My zoning knowledge. I got some. There's no way. Common sense.
This is a permitted use. I know. Just because it's not a hoagie store doesn't mean it isn't a permitted use.
Yeah.
They didn't have to sell sandwiches at the Sunoco.
No. And that the little kiosk at BP, I mean, they sell candy, cigarettes, and you can't even, it's not even a facility you can go into. That means where you pay your money to get
Okay, we have one more item on our agenda, folks. Regina and Steve, we have one more item.
Mr. Chairman, I'm recusing myself on this.
Yep. This is our
Of course, Charlie, okay, he has recused himself.
Hey, guys, we'd like to finish up.
It's not in any order.
We'd like to finish up.
Come on. My neighbor's got the stomach bug. He was at my birthday party this weekend. He says, he sent me a text. I'm not coming back. He ended up in the hospital. Really? Yeah. Yeah, he went in.
Just start talking.
Sounds good. So, Dave Falcone, here on behalf of the trustees of the University of Pennsylvania, we have submitted a financial subdivision plan, which is permitted under the new PLO ordinance. All it does, this plan you see on the table, is our approved land development
Before
plan.
we get into it, can we just like a 5-minute, official 5-minute break?
Okay.
Because honestly, it's not, we're not going to be fair to you if we don't clear our heads for 5
Sure.
minutes. Do you
Whatever you
mind? Because otherwise, we're just,
Whatever
we
you
need,
want.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Brad Ryan. I just making sure that the sidewalk
Yeah, we just didn't change material. It's gonna look the same. It's just trying to make it material. Does it work?
I didn't make it as part of the, I didn't put it, I just did it because I liked it.
Yeah.
It's not part of my purpose. What?
Yeah, so we've had hit and miss. It all depends on.
Oh, I know that.
It's a craft. But either way, so like what we're doing is we're so this is our original approved plan. So nothing's changed on this.
Right. So I'm also, but I mean, I guess that's up to the township.
They already did.
On the board. Yeah, I think that I missed some meetings, whatever, I mean, I wasn't a part of this. Doesn't matter. But, you know, I feel bad for them, they have to maintain the granules, like you say, maybe depend, yeah. That's not quite as public as this one.
What's up,
Hi, how
Lloyd?
you doing?
Good.
I'm just saying that I put a porous pave on my property. It really doesn't hold up though. It's not like concrete. Also, you try to clear the snow off of it. Because they're little pebbles. It's a rubber and stone thing that's glued. I mean,
It's like
that'll be up to them, I guess. That, somebody trips, they're gonna get sued and whatever. Mine's interior.
Yeah.
I mean, now that's no concern of yours, but it's just.
Who?
No, he's not that type of lawyer.
I am not.
Yeah. I'm just be curious to see through the years how that maintains. All the, because that you have to clear it quickly. I have a footbridge that I use to that there. It's really bad, because it moves a little. I also put it on a patio that's right on the grade. Like where that is, a stone bed and everything. I was just telling a guy. This is just to do financial.
A lot of it. Yeah.
Oh, you should have come out.
get going.
So there's a stone bench in front of it. Oh, I'm sorry. The water goes through it, it's right into the ground. I just
I was ready earlier.
I know, yeah.
Got up. Susan got up.
Oh, I lost all my stuff.
Okay.
Are we back?
I think we're back.
All right. Sure. Good. So again, Dave Falcone here on behalf of the trustees of the University of Pennsylvania as part of a financial subdivision at 145 King of Prussia Road. There is no change to the previously approved land development plan, which received final land development approval earlier in the year. That's the plan that I'm showing you on the table. All the financial subdivision does, as permitted in the ordinance, is create a way for the owner of the property to carve off parcels for financial purposes or conveyance purposes, but those parcels must remain under and subject to the overall development plan that was approved. So that's why we're showing you the approved land development plan. We are showing one line kind of down the middle of the property, dividing it in two. This would be one financially subdivided parcel. This would be the second. They would be subject to the approvals of the initial plan, which allows for the setbacks to be reduced. Probably the best way to explain it, it's very much akin to a land condominium or a planned community, insofar as the property itself is approved as a development, and then interior units or lots are created to allow for individual ownership, with the overall development being subject to the ordinance and the interior lots not. This is specifically permitted in the amended PLO and is a completely by right line. We've gotten 2 review letters from your staff. They recognize the ordinance and that there's no relief being sought other than just to draw the line.
Questions from the board?
My only question is whether staff has any input.
Staff?
Everything he said is true, and if Roger can confirm that that this one-page plan is identical and completely consistent with the approved subdivision plan, then there's no problem. But any motion that you would make approving it should include a requirement that they execute the necessary documents to establish cross easements for utilities, for parking, for access ways, and also that they, I think the ordinance requires the maintenance, cleanliness, repair, things like that. They need to execute the necessary declaration of covenants to go on the public record, establishing the easements and maintaining the property.
Yep, of course. Again, so that would again be just like your UPCA or anything like that. So there will be a declaration put on the property. It'll handle all the maintenance, the cross-access, and that's allowed to allow the folks that own the parcels as well as those that visit to cross just like any community would have. So we understand that to be a requirement and would do that in the ordinary course.
Can we make this motion subject to your comments?
Absolutely. Or you can say so moved when I say a motion to approve the financial subdivision contingent upon the execution and recording of declaration of covenants to establish the easements for parking, access, and utilities, and also to guarantee the perpetual maintenance of the improvements.
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, guys. Thank you all.
Old business and new business? Okay, I have 2 very brief things. We need a nominating committee to replace our chair because Kathy's retiring January 1st. And I've asked Charlie to work with Kathy and Elizabeth to create the committee and make the nominations. I would like to appoint, because I will be unable to attend the December meeting, I'd like to suggest an interim appointment of John Lord as chairman for purposes of that meeting. So that's all I have to say. Anybody have anything else they'd like to add? Okay.
Do we need to confirm that appointment, or we're good?
Well, you know, that's how I got this job.
So do we have,
Everybody was
I mean,
out
do we
once.
have, do we have to say?
Everybody was out once, and
Do we
they
have to
said-
make a motion that John is?
No,
the- no,
I'm
we're good.
suggesting it if you.
So we
wanna
don't have to do
something
anything
else.
more? No action needed?
Okay,
That's all.
all right. Very good. Good
I
night,
move we
all.
adjourn. Second. No second needed. All in favor?